through the crystal plating, which is tech that you can get through various events, but it's essentially a very important and cost-efficient alternative to armor.
So, Ragoon, I'm going to have to jump in here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to go through that later because we have 2 minutes left. Yeah, I know. We've already gone through most of the time. So, and I'm horrifically sorry to do this. What I will organise is I'm going to organise. We're going to come on to one of our weekly streams, the Interstellar Assembly, and do this presentation to completion during that. Because unfortunately we have just run out of time. And yeah, I'm terribly sorry about this. We've unfortunately just run short here. And so what we're going to have to do is organise that. We'll organise that as soon as humanly possible and put the information out on the Discord, so that you can at least see the rest of what it is that we were going to talk about. And if the rest of you are free, then you're of course welcome to join for that as well. I'm really sorry, Ragoon. I genuinely am.
No problem.
We unfortunately, and I know as well, Byron and Jojo had stuff they wanted to talk about, and unfortunately we have, just completely and totally run out of time here. So, with all that being said, I do want to say thank you to all 5 of you for joining us here. This has been fascinating. It genuinely has. And I would also like to thank everyone who's been watching. I hope this has been as enjoyable for you guys as it has been for us. Again, we're really sorry that we have run out of time, but there is a schedule to keep, and we will keep to the schedule. So, with that being said, everybody say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
And we will see you all. Bye, guys.
Okay, this should be us live then. Howdy everyone, and welcome to a community panel about converters and mega campaigns and all of that in between. I'm Knorren. With me I have Idrendur and Rolf, aka King of Men. I'm gonna let you guys introduce yourself because you'll probably do a better job. Why are you here on this panel?
So hello. I'm Idrendur, Steven when I'm not online. I've been creating converters for the Paradox games for about a decade now.
And I'm Rolf, King of Men when I am online. And I've been playing Paradox games since Europa Universalis 1, when it was just called Europa Universalis, in fact. And a lot of that experience has been in multiplayer mega campaigns going for a millennium of history. So that's my role.
Yes, and I'm generally here. I'll try and be the one who doesn't know anything about anything, which admittedly is partly true, but I'm also going to try and keep you guys on track. We have a lot of things to go through, so hopefully this will be interesting for both those that play a lot of mega campaigns and use converters, and for those that have like no idea what they even are. We're gonna go over to our cool slides because slides are important. So Steven, I'm gonna let you well, actually, let's start with the obvious one. What are converters? What are we going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so converters are tools that allow you to take a save from the end of one of your Paradox games and import it as a mod into another. So you can play to the end of CK2 or CK3 and continue that game in EU4, and then you can keep chaining them. So EU4 into VIC2, VIC2 into HOI4 or HOI3 if you really wanted. And from there, I guess you can also do Stellaris. You don't really need a tool from that. As much as I like to tease people online about how clever I am to actually get that put in Stellaris, that wasn't actually me.
So what do they? So they essentially, because for those that don't know, I feel like I'm saying very obvious things here, and I apologize for that. But we're talking about the PDS Grand Strategy games, and they are generally running on the same in-game engine, right? Only there are different variations. Stellaris doesn't exactly behave the same way as EU4 or HOI for that matter, or even CK3. So with that said, I'm guessing the reason we haven't done on our side, and I'm talking for Paradox here, we love to see these converters. We just don't be like, we can't really support them on our own end because it seems like it's a lot of work, just generally, to make it work.
Yeah.
That's true. So I believe that I am the one who wrote the first fan-made converter. This would be way back in 2005, when I wanted to convert a game from Crusader Kings 1 to Europa Universalis 2. And at the time, I was a really terrible coder. I may still be a really terrible coder, but at that time, wow. In any case, I did not, in fact, know how to do a proper parser. So there was a lot of detect the end of the line and the open curly brace and detect the matching close curly brace. In any case, yes, they are a lot of work, but back then it was somewhat simpler because, you know, the DLCs weren't quite there yet. You know, when we got a DLC or an expansion rather for Crusader Kings 1, it was a big deal, and I did do a lot of work to upgrade to that version, obviously. But there wasn't the schedule we have now with one or maybe two DLCs a year that you have to update for. So it was a lot simpler back then.
Yeah, that's actually a fair point. Like, how whenever we release an expansion or essentially just an update to one of the grand strategy titles, how much work is it to keep these converters essentially workable with a new patch? Because I know we generally talk and try and tell the community that, hey, we're releasing a new patch or a new update. It might break save games. Your mods are probably going to break as well. And we do know that a lot of people are playing with mods. I'm assuming it's a similar situation with converters, in that as soon as something new and cool comes out, you're like, well, okay, back to fixing a bunch of shit.
Yeah. So it can be a lot of work. Fortunately, there's a bit of a team organized now. So lots of people who pour their time into it. And it can really change. Sometimes it's just little things in the save file that we have to adjust for so they get read. Sometimes it's accounting for new features or changes in the map. Yeah, some of the Hoi 4 dev diaries have got me a little bit worried about the amount of work coming my way.
So essentially, whenever everyone else is like, heck yeah, new updates, new things, new focus trees or whatever, you're like, okay.
Well, focus trees are relatively easy to deal with.
Sure.
But the time when I really curse at Paradox's developers is when they make some change to the format of the save games. I have to parse it. There have been some blistering oaths directed at you, gentlemen. I must admit.
This is why I'm here and not a dev, because I can be like, this just flows off me like water off a duck. I don't like.
Yes, fair enough.
So, with that said, like I want us to go through the main topics here before we get into more of the nitty gritty here. But we mentioned converters, and that kind of ties into the mega campaign, right? And just for those not in the know, which I assume is no one if you're watching this, what's a mega campaign then?
So a mega campaign, or you can go ahead if you like. Yeah. So within a single Paradox game, it's typically called a grand campaign if you play from the very first start date to the end. A mega campaign, therefore, is when you take that up a level and you chain multiple games together. And it's actually kind of exciting these days. It's not necessarily only Paradox games in the mix or just the games. There's some out there where they've started in a Total War game, modded it into a Paradox game, gone from there, or they finish a Paradox game, finish Hearts of Iron, go into Distant Worlds, for instance, or finish Hearts of Iron and go into a Vic 2 mod in the modern day, things like that. So kind of any set of games where you're continuing them together.
So it's essentially you take what you take whatever abomination you've created in whatever game, and you try and port it to something else and keep playing inside of that. That seems like, because one of the things that I find fascinating about mega campaigns is that it's not like Paradox games outside from a Paradox game fan. I'm like, well, Hoi isn't that long if you're playing it quickly, sure, and it's still, you know, by a normal metric, that's still a pretty decently long game. Like, it's going to take me a while to get through a campaign of Hoi, right? But it's still the shortest one, and I feel like you have to. There's a lot of commitment involved in being like, yes, I've played through all of CK3, but I want to keep continuing this bloodline, so now we're going to jump into EU4 and not get A, fed up with my own playstyle, and B, surviving, which...
Yes. I mean, this is very true. My own experience is mostly in multiplayer mega campaigns. I think Stephen was talking about, to a large extent, single player. But either way, you're going to have to impose some sort of limits to make sure that you are, well, you can't do a world conquest in Crusader Kings, right? Then what are you going to do? So you have to have some sort of rule to make sure that you are actually a reasonable nation to play going into the next game. Now, in multiplayer, presumably you get some amount of resistance from the other players, so it's a little easier. In a single-player mega campaign, you would have to pace yourself, role play, do some, maybe switch nations every 100 years, whatever. Do some sort of change up to just prevent the snowball from expanding to the whole.
I guess that's true, because I hadn't really thought about that, but it's not necessarily, like, it's more, it's not, I'm going to take, or rather it doesn't have to be, I'm going to take this nation or bloodline or whatever. It's more, it might as well be, I'm going to take this world and all of the interactions on it onto something else, right? Because it's not just whatever nation or character you've been playing that goes on to the next game. It's hopefully everything else, to the extent that it can move on, right? So
Sure.
So then, as a quick side note here, then in Crusader Kings, normal starting point, we have Noob Island. The first time you play through, people are like, you should probably try Ireland to get a feel for the game. If I wanted to try my first like Paradox mega campaign, going from Crusader Kings to EU4 to Hoi, what should I think about, like, the first time around, outside of not fatiguing out of having too much fun?
Well, you should think. Okay, if we're talking single player,
Yes,
you should think about what are my limits going to be. This you cannot possibly do this as a map painting exercise. So you're going to have to decide, okay, am I going to role play as a reasonably historically realistic England? Am I going to concentrate on what my dynasty does more than what my country does? Am I going to switch nations? You have to decide on some sort of strategy beforehand. Maybe you want to conquer all of Europe, and then in Europa you switch to, say, India or China, and you try to resist the doom blob that you created. That could be a fun approach. But I think if you're going to get the most out of it, you're definitely going to have some sort of strategy, meta strategy maybe, for how am I going to play this game.
And I guess the follow-up question, and I feel like we've touched a bit on that, but just to be clear, and also follow the talking points that we've put down, because gosh darn it, we're prepared. Like, what are the main like difficulties in doing this, like, the first time around? What should I look out for?
Well, if you're playing this in 2005 with Crusader Kings 1, what you should mostly watch out for are technical difficulties, to be brutally honest. I am sorry, but I enjoyed playing Crusader Kings for a very long time, and it was a great game, but it was fairly seriously buggy, especially in multiplayer. But okay, that's all water under the bridge. What you should watch out for now, and I'm going to talk about multiplayer here, and maybe Stephen will want to say something about single player afterwards. In multiplayer, the biggest problem we have is people winning too early. You're signing up for this 1,000 years of history, and then somebody is a good player, or they get a couple of lucky breaks, and after 200 years, it is clear that no realistic coalition is going to resist this hegemon. So, good game. Sorry, we have to start over. In principle, what you want to do is to have, coalition diplomacy, human bad boy, so that whoever is winning gets resisted. But we find that this is actually quite difficult to arrange for every occasion. So what we've been doing in recent mega campaigns is to impose some house rules, especially on the early games. Like, you can't be bigger than X amount of counties in Crusader Kings. Now that we have this governing capacity in Europa, you can't go over your governing capacity. Well, that was an immediate size limit, right? So then that leads to the next problem, which is that if you can't expand, you tend to get somewhat stagnant diplomacy, because Well, firstly, people don't really like to backstab anybody anyway when they're going to be playing for 1,000 years, or in real life, it's a year, which is quite a long time.
Oh, and it seems like
so there.
Sorry,
is
we
in
dropped you there for
any case
for
a
a bit.
tendency for alliances to form that are quite permanent.
I think we had some connection issues. Do you mind repeating the last
I'm
bit?
sorry about that.
You were just talking about how diplomacy, you don't want to backstab early if you're going to play with the same people in a campaign over a year.
Right. So there is a tendency for perma alliances to form. Like you let's say Germany tells France, okay, I'm going to go east, you go west. The internal European border is going to be peaceful for 1,000 years. This tends to, not make for that interesting a game, especially once people reach their size limits and they don't really have that much of a reason to go to war anyway. So then we try to deal with that problem by having missions. So the GM will announce that, okay, this is the mission. This is the session in which everybody tries to win the. Oh, I'm sorry. My mind just went blank. But there are major events in Europa, like the Orthodox, the Protestant Catholic War, right?
Yep.
War of the Holy League. That's it. So everybody pick a side in the Holy League, and we'll go at it, and whoever wins gets some bonuses for the conversion to Victoria.
Okay, that makes sense, and I feel like we have a background. What for those that haven't been me when we planned this panel, I hadn't realized how long a backstory converters actually have. Like, I've been at Paradox for like 6.5 years. Of course, I've known about converters. We talk about converters internally more as they're really cool. We wish we kind of could do more to help out, but there's only so many hours in a day. But also, I have a freaking converters timeline that's that kind of like, it starts early. Can we go through and get the backstory to like what got the ball rolling here and where we're at currently?
Sure. So I think that would be me. So as I mentioned before, I've been playing Paradox games since Europa 1, and I got into multiplayer games pretty early. And sometime in 2004, thereabouts, my memory is a little bit rough that far back. We finished the group I was with at the time finished a Victoria multiplayer game, and the leader said Crusader Kings had just come out. And if I remember correctly, Crusader Kings had this really cool feature that you could export it to Europa 2. And so he had this idea, let's do a really long multiplayer game. And he called it The March Through Time, which was a really terrible name. I called it The Great Game. And as I'm the only one who's still around from that group, that name presumably stuck.
I mean,
so that was The Great Game 1.
From a marketing perspective, I feel like the first one was actually slightly better, but I see your point. You won out in the
end. Yes, well, time in the market, that's the important thing. So in any case, we started Crusader Kings. I was playing the Norwegian dynasty, the Inglings, and we tried a couple of test conversions, and my memory of this is I wasn't terribly pleased at what the built-in exporter would produce, and I said, I can do a better job than that. And so I went and fired up my trusty Java dev environment and started typing. And that was the first fan-made converter to the best of my knowledge.
And this was around 2005, right?
Sure, 2004, 2005, roughly that time. And at that time, we could not play Crusader Kings very fast in multiplayer. I think we were counting ourselves lucky if we got speed 2. and maybe 20 years in a session. And 20 years in a session and 1 session per week, you're playing Crusader Kings for a while, right?
Mhm.
Because we were playing from 1066 to 1452, 1444, whatever the end date was.
I'll be honest. The great game seems to make a lot more sense now. I retract my previous statement. Fair enough.
Yes, which actually brings me to one problem with mega campaigns that I didn't mention, which is maintaining player interest and just ability to play, because real life happens over such a lengthy period. Of course, that applies mainly to multiplayer. If you know, in single player, well, there's one guy and he can either play to the end or not. But in multiplayer, for somebody to, you know, change jobs or get a new study schedule or whatever and have to drop out is a notorious killer of empires, because there's, you know, two sessions usually of protection from attack, and then the howling mob descends and tears the victim to pieces. So getting back to the timeline, I played the Inglings for a long time, you know, years on end, because by the time we reached the end of Europa, we thought that, well, somebody else, I believe, had made a Europa to Victoria converter. That wasn't me, but we've noticed that, hey, there is this extra converter. Let's see what we can do with that. And by the time we got to the end of Victoria, we either I wrote or somebody else wrote, I can't remember now, a converter to Hearts of Iron. So I think we actually had originally intended to quit in Europa, but then the timeline kept extending, and so this dynasty that I had started in 1066 ended in 1947-ish, being nuked in the radioactive mud of Germany, because China backstabbed me at just the right moment, or possibly I backstabbed China, and it didn't quite work out.
And that's still an impressive run, all things considered.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote an AAR for this, right? I'm sitting down writing something every week for a year. It's on my blog if you go back far enough in the archives, but to be honest, I wouldn't recommend starting there, because I'm not super proud of my writing skills as they were 15 years ago. But
just a quick side note, for those that want mega campaign recommendations, both AAR and YouTube stuff, that's coming later in this panel. We have slides.
We do have slides. Yeah, so you know, I started out just quoting, Olaf was king in Norway after the death of his brother Magnus, which is the opening of the saga of the real King Olaf, who, of course, is king of Norway in the Crusader Kings setup of 1066. And then I sort of went from there in that style. I tried to keep to that sort of laconic, character-focused saga style for the next 400 years. And then by the time we got to EU4, I was kind of burned out on that, to be honest. So I switched to a history book style, and I wrote a bunch of excerpts from the fictional book From Berserker to Battleship, the Yngling dynasty, 1066 to 1999, or whatever date I chose. And then when you know, my dynasty had petered out in the radioactive mud of Germany, then we went back to Crusader Kings. I think by this time we were playing the Deus Vult expansion, and we did it all over again. So that was the Great Game 2. And so we, you know, every so often Paradox would release a new version, EU3, EU4, CK2, Victoria 2, and I would. The cadence worked out that I would basically write a new converter for every time the mega campaign would convert, because the old one would no longer support that new version of whichever two games were involved. So there are lots of versions hanging around in my old archives, but some of them unfortunately are lost to the depths of time.
And then, Stephen, according to the notes here, around 2010, you show up with your first converter. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Divine Wind had just come out for EU3, and the old converter didn't work. And it was a while before was it even Divine Wind? Heir to the Throne, I think, actually. And that broke the converter. It was a while before the Great Game rolled around to that point, and I didn't even know about the Great Game. And I was on a bit of vacation from work, and I thought, hey, I'm a coder. I can probably figure out how to update this. And so was able to make the absolute minimum change to make it work. I don't think we ever got the map province mappings figured out because the map changed between expansions in EU3, so it was always a little bit ugly. But that worked out. Divine Wind came out, and I thought I should do this, and I couldn't figure it. And eventually Rolf came along and updated everything, so it was great. And someone had announced trying to do, like around that time Victoria 2 came out, someone had announced wanting to do a converter from EU3 to Vic 2. And my initial perspective was, oh, there's a lot of programmers here. I should focus on this other. When the Divine Wind update dropped, I said, oh, okay, let me see if they need help on this other one. Only to find that pretty much no work had ever been done. Just everyone showed interest, didn't get to coding. So I was like, well, I may as well jump in. Started writing a pile of code, and kind of went from there. And eventually kind of became the lead of things. It's now kind of from a marketing branding perspective. If I see other people expressing interest to write a converter, I'll usually message them and say, hey, do you want to kind of brand with us? We do have some tools that are useful. It means I can handle some of the administrative stuff for you. Like, you don't have to, but people tend to like to not have to worry about doing all the announcement posts, writing some kind of fancy front end to collect everyone's options and actually run the tool, things like that.
And I mean, I'm sure we'll get to this at the end as well. But if people at this point are like, "Ooh, I wanna help out working on converters," how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so for each of them, we have development threads on the forum. You can join there, or you can just send me a message on the Paradox forums is usually a good way, or even on Reddit, especially if you're interested in helping out. We have a private Discord. I do try and keep that a little bit locked down for development mostly rather than fan stuff.
Not that
I don't have a community manager. I don't have a community manager, and I don't want to spend all of my time, handling that. Fans are wonderful, but every now and again, people go a little overboard. I prefer to focus on the actual coding side. But yes, reach out to me. We can use help of all kinds, coders, artists, people who are good at looking at maps and figuring out how things should map. People just to test things out and report funny things they find. All of it is extremely helpful.
So I think that kind of finally brings us to the last segment here, and most of our slides. Like, if you're like me, don't want to help out making converters because you can't code, and you don't necessarily have the time to sit down in a multiplayer event for a year, where can I passively enjoy these great games or mega campaigns in other formats?
So there's a lot of people enjoy writing their mega campaigns up as stories. The great game ones are good to look up, but in general, on the Paradox multiplayer and AAR forums, there's lots and lots of stories. Rolf, you mentioned sending you a PM to you.
Sure, that's for if you want to join my current mega campaign. We also have a private Discord, so if you're interested in playing a mega campaign in the post-apocalyptic wastelands of the After the End mod, ping me on the Paradox forums, and I'll send you a Discord invite.
Oh yeah, you can go straight into mods as well. I hadn't even thought about that. Smart.
Yeah, this is going to be a bit of a challenge because I'm not responsible for the conversion on this one, but our GM swears that he will make the converters work for starting with this, total map conversion of the After the End mod and getting it into Europa. So I say good luck to him, but it'll certainly be interesting.
Yeah, and then you mentioned your blog on here, so you have all the great game write-ups archived. There's also on Reddit r/mega campaigns. They have a bunch of video ones. Then actually a very classic place for mega campaigns is on Something Awful and the LP archives for the ones that do get archived. Some of the really old classics are there, and there's a pretty consistent thread of well-written ones starting about once a year. Usually some amount of audience participation. They very frequently find ways to push the edges of the genre in different ways. So it's really quite a creative space there. So on their Let's Play section, or for the old ones, you can find them on the archives.
And of course, if your reg date is not lower than 2010, I don't get it. And I say that because my reg date at Something Awful is in the 2000, because I'm cool like that. Actually, no, the Let's Play forum's great. Shout out to the LP janitor Boulder, who keeps track of the LP archives. He's doing great work. I was unrelated. Surprising amount of people are from the Something Awful forums in one way or another. Onwards and upwards. What more slides do we have? Oh, YouTube.
Yeah, so I had a list of particular ones I wanted to highlight. So I guess I should have mentioned YouTube on the previous slide. We do have a handful of people who do things in that format. Probably the oldest one I could find was Flying MacGuffin's Brittany mega campaign. And that one seems to be a little bit longer. And then some special ones for the current converter teams to call out. Wonder Productions was kind of one of the earlier modern ones to do. He also produced the only tutorial video for the converter tools that I've ever seen. I think it's a little out of date now. We've changed a lot of things on him, but it's still a good guide on the overall process. Then Drew Durnills, he had an Observer mega campaign with something like 2.5 million views. Completely absurd numbers. So very popular. And then ISRO Productions has started doing yearly mega campaigns. And we've actually looked at our subscriber counts for the converters on Steam. And every time he does one, we can just see a bump in the graph. It goes way up. So, and they're pretty entertaining. He has a good sense of humor. And then let's see here. On the Paradox forums, some other ones, kind of highlighting more recent ones. I won't read them all off here, but on the slides, these are a bunch of ones, including many of these are award winners. So the forums have, for the AIRs, yearly and quarterly awards. This last year, they added a mega campaign category. And so several of the ones on here were winners. I've got mine listed on here kind of in the middle. It has stalled out. There is hope. I'm working on the HOI 4 mod. One day, the Roman Empire will continue.
Well, this is another advantage of the multiplayer mega campaign, that you've got all the other players to keep you honest and make you show up every week.
Yeah. So, but it was interesting. I did happen to inspire a couple of other ones that are still ongoing. So Yeah, so these are all classics on the forums, more recent ones. Then on the something off on the LP archives, Kingdom Come is actually the oldest single player mega campaign AR of any location I could find anywhere. So very possibly the first. The author suggested that they probably saw some on the forums before that, but they're not sure. This was like 2005, 2006, so hard to remember. We have a couple of classics on here by Paradox's Wiz.
Yeah.
So before he was at Paradox, so these are like classics of the genre. There's some more recent ones as well that have been ongoing. So we have Let's Wear Black by Opholof that actually started in Total War Attila. And he's since been hired by Paradox.
I was going to say, if people can identify all of these authors who have been hired by Paradox, they get a cookie, but you've already spoiled it, so no one gets cookies now.
Sorry, everyone. But yes, there is kind of a trend there. And yeah, Something Awful and the LP Archives ones are kind of near and dear to my heart because they also show a good faculty for doing a lot of extra modding as well with them. So they tend to have like really good mechanics going on. Something Awful isn't the biggest fan of the converter tools themselves. I think in some cases they do use them and then mod from there. Some cases they do it entirely by hand, which is impressive to me. Yeah, all those Vic 2 pumps.
We are about to run out of time, which at the start of this no one thought possible. But there is one very important question left, which is extra important for those of us that aren't necessarily aren't that into mega campaigns or haven't been before. What the heck is Secret Denmark?
So Secret Denmark, and I think this is the reason Something Awful doesn't like the converter tools. There was a review in the middle of some other AAR of a converted campaign, and back in that day of the converters, they were a little bit janky, and you would have random countries assigned. So you might have like Spain and Portugal there, but if Castile was around, it would just get a random tag from whoever. So you might have some African nation showing up there. And this converted campaign, it was just completely wild with how it showed up. It was in Vic 2 after one of the expansions when all of these dynamic nations showed up. So you had names like Secret, just in North America, a country called Secret. In Denmark, which wasn't in Denmark, it was in Greenland, but it was controlled by Secret, I think. So it actually showed up on the map as Secret Denmark. And it was just one of the things mentioned in this absolutely hilarious review, but people just latched onto it. So we loved it in the converters. We tried to sneak it in a few places. Obviously, some of the Paradox developers liked it because when EU4 Random New World showed up, it was one of the nations that could show up there. It's become this ascended meme. It's great.
Well, Stephen, Rolf, thank you guys so much for talking to us about mega campaigns and converters. If you're interested in playing, watching, or just taking part, hopefully this panel has given you some insight and inputs on where and what to do to go about doing that. I kind of got lost in the middle of that sentence. But basically, hopefully we've given you the information you need. Like I said, we are out of time. Final thoughts. Stephen, Rolf, go.
You should read my AARs.
Yes, anyone with any talent whatsoever should feel free to come and volunteer to help out. We can always use more people, any skill level whatsoever.
Yeah, and if you're going to use a converter now, you should probably use one of his, because mine are kind of old and junky, and I don't really have time to support them anymore. So even though he is a heretic who does not use the one true brace style, I'm going to recommend the converters made by the team that he leads, and not mine.
And that will have to be our closing statement. Thank you guys so much, and have a good evening. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this talk about bringing Stellaris to the consoles. I'm Pontus, and I'm the marketing manager for Stellaris, and I'm not here alone. No, I'm here and joined by David, Adam, and David from Tantalus, our studio, bringing Stellaris to the console. And I couldn't be happier to be here today talking to you guys, as we have just announced Federations and Expansion Pass 4 coming to console 17th of June. So enough with that. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Cool. Okay. So I'm David Giles. I'm the producer on Stellaris console. I've been doing it for, I think, 3 and a bit years. I'm one of the oldest people in the studio. So I've been making games for nearly 30 years now. And I'm pretty much paid to worry about everything. So it's probably, I'm being paid for the worst part of my personality. I can now pass over to Adam, who's one of our coders.
G'day, my name's Adam Clark. I'm a gameplay and UI programmer primarily for Tantalus. I've been with Tantalus just over a year now. Plenty of experience leading up to that. Yeah, I'll pass on to designer David.
Hey there, everybody. My name's David Doe. I'm the UI and UX designer for Stellaris console. I've been on the project since almost the very start, and I've been at Tantalus for 9 years or so, and it's been quite a pleasure working with Mr. Giles for just a tiny fraction of his long and storied career.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for that quick introduction. So starting off right off the bat, I know one of the things that we have talked the most about is about UI and their interface. What would you say is the most important thing to consider when designing a Stellaris console edition?
I think I might take this one, gentlemen.
Mr. Doe? Yeah, please, Mr. Doe.
Yeah, I think for us it was just making sure that we got out of the way of the game. Stellaris is brilliant by itself, and the most important thing for us was to make it feel like it was a natural extension of what you wanted to express in the game. So we didn't want to make it feel difficult to use. We wanted to make things feel fairly natural, and we just wanted to have the game show itself to be what it is, which is a really exciting grand strategy game, and we think we've done that.
Yeah, not from the start though. Not from the start. It took a while to get to that point, I must say. So there was a lot of toing and froing for many months before we managed to get there. But yes, we sort of got there in the end, which is good. And so that the players can experience that now.
That's true. It didn't come out fully formed, but we had lots of bad ideas that led to good ideas. I think there was
yes.
so many bad ideas. I've got stacks and stacks of them, but for the most part, I think we managed to get through to the good ones.
Yeah. So we started with, a many 100-page design doc, and pretty much threw it away after, just seeing how that sort of, felt to the player. So it was, with the best intentions in the world, we thought we had it sort of nailed in paper form, and then we just started building it and realised that no, it wasn't going to cut it. So then we just had to iterate on that. So you didn't see that sort of painful throwing away all the ideas to start with and then getting to the better ideas. So for example, we use City Skylines as a sort of a launching place for us, because that was once again a very, very sort of mouse keyboard style of game, and we sort of thought, well, we could use lots and lots of the things that we learnt from that. But that was lots of radial menus, that sort of thing. And so we started down that path, and then we realised that it just sort of wasn't appropriate. We sort of backtracked from that. So the poor designer, she'd worked many, many months on generating this huge document, and it needed to be changed quite substantially very early on. Obviously, no one has seen this, but it took a little minute.
Speaking,
I think that was because of the complexity. Oh, sorry, Pontus.
Yeah, speaking of that, we are touching upon the subject here of more of a design philosophy, and especially going more into the controller scheme of things. What's your thought of more of the human interaction there and the interface aspects of playing a strategy game on console?
I'm not sure I've ever really considered it like that, I have to say, Pontus. I think for us, we just like to make sure that the player can execute their actions in the way that they feels natural for them. So for us, we split the screen into 4 quadrants that you access the various menus with the D-pad, the 4 buttons on the D-pad. And we divided our camera control into something that we feel is quite natural in the industry, where people are used to using a kind of tilt and pitch and zoom and all those functions that people are already used to. And we borrowed quite heavily from City Skylines for that. But essentially, we just wanted to make sure that we weren't trying to reinvent the controller. There's an action button, there's a cancel button, there's some other modification buttons, but essentially we just needed to make sure that we weren't getting in our own way and that it made sense. Once you sit down and play with it for 5 minutes, I think it feels very natural.
Yes, and just to add to that, I think the thing that we had, which is very, very different from if you were playing on the PC, is that we had to assume that the player was almost horizontal on a couch, and in that sort of almost in a very, very relaxed state, they can still use the controller and not feel frustrated or upset by it. So it's a more, it needed to be, you needed to be still relaxed and slouched more than you would be if you were sort of hunched over your keyboard and your mouse trying to win. You needed to, not exactly nodding off, but you needed to be more sort of, like I said, horizontal in your as you were playing.
No, I can definitely see that as myself, kind of finding myself in a different mind space while playing Stellaris on the console compared to playing Stellaris on the PC. Did that kind of mind space aspect of it affect the design choices you've made for Stellaris Console Edition?
I think you were there right at the beginning, Mr. Giles. Do you think
yes, okay.
We had that as a conscious decision?
Well, no. In as much as when we were playing, it was a thing where we would notice friction. And when I say friction, it's more to do with something when the player was using the controller that either felt unnatural or just the flow was broken. So there were things with choosing to use the D-pad to navigate around the the screens a lot, to make sure that you can always back out of wherever you are. There needed to be a consistency, and there needed to be there were no bits where we sort of said, well, this is a special case thing where you have to do this in a particularly different way. If we did that, it was we needed to make sure it needed to be a thing where, as quickly as possible, the player understood the controls and became used to them. So they weren't thinking about that anymore. So I guess what happens is when we were doing our iterations, to start with, we would be playing with the controller, and all of a sudden we'd get to a special case thing that we'd done, and you would just feel a moment's hesitation as the player was using the controller, and we realised that needed to be fixed. So that was sort of like endless iterations of just playing and seeing whether the gameplay was smooth. And so for us, I guess the ultimate, and this is sort of cutting to the chase, I guess, or cutting to the end point, is that we do know that there are some users that prefer using the controller than using the mouse and keyboard. And if we get to that stage and they don't feel it's some sort of compromise that they're using the controller, then we've sort of succeeded. And that's sort of, it was really to do with playing the game for hours and hours and hours. If the player gets to a point where they get stuck, or they're saying, if you ever felt like you wanted to throw the controller at the screen, then we had to fix it. And that sort of was the test. And there were definitely lots of want to throw the controller at the screen. And so whenever that happened, it wasn't a thing where, as they say in Australia, she'll be right. It had to be, no, let's fix this. Let's go back, and what do we need to do to correct this this design that we've done.
So speaking of that, can we elaborate a little bit? Anything that you've kind of find more challenging? We can start off by talking a little bit about, the current version of Stellaris Console Edition. What has been the most challenging getting it to the place where it is? Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
I think for us,
I could just yes, please, David.
I think just thinking back, I was looking over some of the older design imagery that we did for the first release, and then the subsequent release, and then the current release, and then the announced release. And for us, it's tricky to integrate so many complicated concepts on a screen that the PC kind of delivers effortlessly. So, for example, a science ship, the science ship, when you click it, has something in the order of 23 different actions you can do on the science ship panel. So you can rename, you can reassign, you can return, you can disband, you can do all these type of things, and they're all just kind of there. And if you want to know what they are, then you have to, you put your mouse over it and you hover it. We don't have that luxury on the console. So every time there is an update, and particularly the big update between 1.7 and 2.2.6, there was so much that changed. The maps changed, the planetary tiles changed. All of the work that we had done in the initial UI that we'd spent quite a lot of time getting right, and at least getting it to the point where we felt like it was right. And all of that work had to be redone. So every single panel throughout the game had to be fundamentally redrawn from scratch. And that was quite challenging in terms of the code load, and also the art load and the design load. And I think that might have been the most worrisome time for Mr. Giles when we were doing that kind of massive overhaul. And I can't speak for the programming side of things because I can't tell you that I understand it. But I know that for Adam, whenever we do a big update, it's important to see what Paradox have loaded in for us as the new changes. And we're all quite excited to see what they are because we get to see them a little bit before everybody else. But it always generates a big list, and we often have to revisit our work.
Speaking of that, Adam, do you have anything to add from your perspective onto that? What has been challenging and what we have kind of accomplished so far?
So I'm fairly new to the project in that I started on the Stellaris team with the work on 2.6, so from 2.26 through to 2.6. And so that was introducing the Galactic community and a fair bit of extra features to Federation. Before Stellaris, I hadn't played a 4X since Space Empires 3 back at the the turn of the century. I just hadn't found a game that felt the same in terms of that reward for flying ships through space and the whole expanding wormhole graph of conquered territory. So it was quite nice once I started with Tantalus. They're like, this is what you'll be working on. So I went and picked it up and started playing. I'm like, yeah, all right, this is great. We're doing this on console. Let's have a look. So once I joined the team and started looking at how they had structured their UI as opposed to the PC side of things. So PC, everything's just a button or a window that you can close. Under the hood, for the console edition, there's this stack of flowing menus that you need to be able to pop back and forward between seamlessly, and they'd really nailed that. So it was quite pleasant to come on to the team at that point where they'd already hit their rhythm with how they were designing the menus, and then being given the opportunity to just go and take the PC version of Galcom and then make it our own for when I say Galcom, Galactic Community, for console, and that seemed to have come through pretty well. I haven't heard any complaints about the Galactic Community on console. It's always nice, but that flow, that how fewer button presses can we get things done in, is quite important, so that you're not just going down tree after tree after tree of menus just to send something somewhere.
So you would say, just reiterating on that, so you would definitely say, like, there is, and especially for Stellaris Console Edition, it's not just taking a keyboard and mouse input and then just straight off the bat it runs on a controller, right? We have done some major interface and UI and UX in between, right? Absolutely.
When I was doing some prep for this talk, just to see what came before 2.6, and I was chatting with some of the programmers who'd been on the project since 1.7, one of the earliest changelogs was an attempt to implement a mouse and cursor style of input using the gamepad, and it was scrapped immediately there and then. It just did not feel right. It was clumsy. And they just have not gone back. And it's for the best, absolutely. One of the things after our previous conversation that Dave and I had a chat about was coming from just PC gaming backgrounds, Dave Doe and myself. We don't forgive a console for being a console when it comes to implementation. We want to make it feel as smooth as it can be. PC is spoilt with its mouse and keyboard setup, and when you're restricted to a controller, we can get it feeling as good, if not better, or at least we think we have managed.
I like our version more.
Yeah, I
like our version way more.
You got to remember who's paying the bills there, right?
Say the word. I introduced Adam to this word when he came onto the project, and it's not something that you hear in everyday language, but the word is navigable.
Navigable.
And we have to make we have to make so many of these menus navigable. And
the entire thing is now a graph under the hood instead of all these menus that just pop up, and whatever's on top is what you get to click. Everything is connected.
And I think, like, in our talks before then, we talked, and I'm going to come back to that quite a lot, is the fact that you have to kind of do that, right? You have to go back, you have to go with a controller first approach, because in the end, it's all about that experience, right? When you have your controller in your hand, as you have already mentioned, right? You won't forgive a bad implementation when stuff stops flowing when you try to navigate, especially in a game like Stellaris, where there's a lot of stuff going on, right?
Yeah,
there's so much. One of my favorite things is watching Mr. Giles play. It's, whenever we give him something new to do, well, it's just between the three of us, I think you play consoles more. Outside of work, and you have a different perspective on what it means to interact with the game. and especially one like Stellaris, even though you're doing it at work, but you bring some of that home time philosophy back with you, and it's important for you to watch you play.
Lying down. I mean, I'm a PC gamer as well, but I do like being on the couch. I do, so yes. Yeah. So I do have most consoles, and it is a thing too where, Stellaris is complicated enough without, having an input that just fights against you all the time. So that truly is a test for me. And I think everyone has experienced a bad port where, this game is magnificent on the PC and it's just this sort of like busted, not quite there sort of thing where, no, you should play the PC version, don't bother with the console version. And yeah, we're not interested in that. I should say from a producer's point of view, it's slightly terrifying because iteration has no end. And so for me, who it's to do with, I've said at the start, this is how long it will take and this is how much it will cost. Iteration just goes on. It's sort of like art. It has to be abandoned at a certain point. But yeah, it's a thing where it goes against the grain to sort of say, no, this is not good enough. We need to do it again because at some level I want to ship the product. So I have the two things working. But I also know that if a game that comes from Tantalus, any of our sort of console ports, especially if it's a sort of a keyboard mouse centric type game, and it hits the market, then and the users say this just doesn't work, then that's the end of it. Do you know what I mean? That's sort of like, it's sort of like we put a bullet through the head of that title. So that's, that you can do a sort of a short-term gain where you get something to market and you sort of say, yes, we just sort of flipped it. But yeah, that's never going to last as far as the players are concerned.
Yeah.
I don't think that's
most definitely. Yeah. No, but most definitely. I mean, in the end, it has to work on the console. When you sit down, when you boot it up, it needs to be fast. It needs to be fluid. Speaking about, the hardware, the controller scheme, and that sort of input, there's another topic that's kind of standing with our community, and that's the topic of performance. Can you elaborate a little bit on that topic and what we have been thinking about in terms of performance on the console edition?
So I guess I can talk about when we first started with the project, and so obviously we're restricted, especially with the PS4 and the Xbox, in as much as we get what we've given. There are no there's no, you can't add an extra hard drive or, extra RAM, all those sorts of things. It is what it is. So there are things where we rely on our more senior engineers, which are skilled in taking large things and fitting them in small boxes. So as a studio that's done this for 26 years, it's a thing that Tantalus, which is crunching things down. However, it should be said that all of our senior programmers, when they get to Stellaris, it's about shaving milliseconds off everything. And it goes on forever. And it's always that thing about fighting between, or just balancing between, simulation tick rate and frame rate. It's just this endless battle that we have all the time. So this is a sort of ongoing thing. So I remember very early on when we first got it running, we turned off all the particles in combat. Like, we couldn't run them. We couldn't run any of the particles. And we sort of said, well, what will the audience accept as far as particles in the game? And there were none. So, your ship would just disappear. And we sort of said, well, that's not really going to be good enough. So for the project, we had one coder, and he was just crunching everything, doing everything he could to get the performance up. And particle by particle, they were turned back on until by the end, when we shipped, and I can't remember which version it was, to be honest with you, but by the time, it must have been right at the very start, we were able to turn all the particles back on again. But when we first started, none of that could function just because of the performance issues that we had. However, there are some, compromises, the size of the galaxy, that sort of thing. So we have to do some things where we sort of like, reduce that. In future, who can tell? But it is a thing. It's an ongoing battle that we have, and we receive, the source code from Paradox, and we sort of say, oh my God, we're going to have to optimize even more. And the nice thing is too that we know that some of our optimizations have rolled back into the PC version, which is quite flattering for us. But yes, it's going to be a challenge forever, and that's for sure.
Exactly. And just to kind of wrap that one up, in terms of, it's a never-ending quest of optimization, right? But the fact that we have that pre-defined box and hardware, how much does that help that we know what an Xbox brings? We know what a PlayStation brings to the table, which is quite differently from the PC side, right?
Yes, oh, absolutely. I mean, we know the size of our aquarium. We know exactly what we've got to play with. But usually what it is we start off with our aquarium, which is this big, and the fish that we've got to put in it, is the size of the house. And so then it's a question of what can we do to make this fit. And so it's sort of, I guess, in some ways, we don't have to worry about minimum spec. We don't have to worry about, making sure that, if someone hasn't got the right driver, all those sorts of things. It's sort of what it is. The other thing we have with consoles is it has to run straight away. It can't crash. You're not going to be tweaking anything. It just needs to work. If you buy a console, you're not fiddling with anything. It runs out of the box. And so we obviously have, the classifiers, the XR and the TRC requirements of the hardware manufacturers, and they're very, very strict. So there's another of not only do we have to, do the right thing by the players, but we also have to do the right thing by the console as well, ensuring that it behaves as the player would expect across the board.
That's really awesome. It's really nice, and I. Like, speaking about the aquarium size and speaking about what the next generation of console has brought, can you elaborate a little bit on, the new power that the next generation consoles, Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 has brought to the table? And if there is anything in particular that you are more excited about?
Yeah, I think I can feel the Sony and Microsoft reps, kind of banging our door down if we start talking about them. But I do like seeing how far we can push this metaphor. For example, I think they're quite an exotic aquarium, and there's lots of different types of fish that we're going to be able to add to the ecosystem. But I don't know exactly how much detail we can give about how excited we are and what those consoles are bringing to the table. But we are very personally excited.
It will load faster.
Well, we did bring Stellaris to optimized for Series X and S, which enabled some of those next gen features for the Xbox version. But obviously, the game in itself is running and plays great on both the next gen consoles as well, right? So I think. Leaning into that and wrapping that one up, I think we just have to see, maybe it's a little bit too early to see exactly how far we can push it. But obviously, we are super excited about that as well. So we do have a few community-asked questions. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank the community for getting involved here. Lacey asks, how long did it take to get Stellaris Console Edition onto console? And that's a little bit of a tricky one, but let's see if we can try to answer that one.
What do you think, Mr. Giles? I have a couple of answers bouncing around, but yeah.
Maybe you answer it. It's a bit of an amalgam. It's a bit of a blur because of all the different versions. I think I'm sort of thinking. The bit where we sort of thought we had something that was almost presentable was probably 6 months, I would say, 6 or 7 months. But that's sort of well before it's released, and there's still lots of broken things. But that's, from initial design doc to something that we thought was sort of okay. But I'm sort of guessing a bit, Mr. Doe. If you've got a better answer, please leap in here. It's just a big blur for me.
I think there's a couple of technically correct answers. I think kind of the first technically correct answer is about 4 weeks. We managed to get it working on a console, but it didn't represent anything. It was just the PC version running on a console, and you couldn't do anything with it. You couldn't interact with it. It was just, we loaded it onto the console. I think then it took about another 3 or 4 months after that to get the first iteration of the design running and active with the controller. And then I think it took another 3, maybe 4 months after that just to go through some of those iteration changes. So I think altogether probably in the 8 to 9 month range before we had something that we were willing to show other people. And then we still had a significant amount of time after that to make sure that it was presentable for the public. And they're all very different stages. So the first stage is kind of proof of concept, programmers happy. The second stage is, artists have an idea how much work they've got to do and designers happy. And then the third and fourth stages are about making QA and production happy. And they all have technically correct answers. And I think it was probably about 9 months. In the spirit of the question, probably about 9 months.
So you would say, just to wrap this up, it's more of the first kind of phase of just getting it running is quite short, just talking, a little bit fluffy about it. And then the main chunk of time is actually to get the interface in a state where it's fun and easy and to interact with, but also polishing. And we have already talked a little bit about, that constant iteration process, right?
Yeah, it's endless. And, I think some of the earlier builds had, programmer art for one, which is never, the most aesthetic thing, but also had some of my art in it, which is even worse. And so those UI changes that are required after the artists get involved are really very necessary because for the longest time you're kind of playing in the skeleton of what the game is, and you have to really use your imagination to project what it's going to eventually look like onto the screen, and just trust in the process that the artists are going to deliver you something great. And obviously they have, but yeah, it's that 6 to 9 months period after we finally get it loading on a test kit. That's just where it starts. And I think now we've been in development for, I don't want to say 3 or 4 years, Mr. Giles. Do you have a feeling for how long we've been working on Stellaris now?
Yes, I think, we're in 3 and a bit years now. Based
non-stop.
Around, when I started on it. Yeah. Absolutely. Non-stop for me.
So, absolutely. Ramonan, I'm going to paraphrase this question a little bit. It is talking a little bit about, what the chances are that, the consoles and the PC cross-play and that sort of stuff. And this ties a little bit into the aquarium question and analogy we had before. What is the challenges here when it comes to this discussion about, getting consoles and PC to work together, or rather to be cross-platform?
They are difficult problems to solve. So there's compliance with the console manufacturer's terms of services interacting with PC. That's the first thing that springs to mind. The technical challenge becomes a matter of fairness. You don't often see things like shooters cross-platform because mouse and keyboard versus controller doesn't elicit the same sort of fairness in a user. That'd be an interesting challenge, though, to consider: is console the superior experience by enabling such a feature?
It definitely is. It absolutely is.
I'd
love to go toe to toe with a PC user on console. I would love
I actually would.
So after all, just to wrap it up, it's a lot of challenges across the board where there's a multiple of factors that makes that a really, really big challenge. So we have another question from Mobius Y. How much planning is involved in improvements being implemented into the game rather than any other mechanics? For example, anomaly tracker. What did its creation and design entail?
That one, we had one of the other programmers kind of fiddling around between builds and realizing that he was losing track of what his science ships were doing over time. And then we found that there's no reason why we couldn't list these things in the situation log or in their own tab. And it was just a matter of having a couple of discussions and talking about the overall benefits of what this would mean to the player experience. And then we kind of throw together a design doc, and it's not too big. It's only a couple of pages, and it just kind of talks you through what that's going to look like for the player. And then we set some time aside in a sprint and get permission from Mr. Giles, and sometimes, and then we put it in the game and see how it works.
Well, so speaking of that, so here's a thing. The radial menu. Now, so in City Skylines, it uses radial menus a lot, and we decided, for many, many reasons, that it was not going to be appropriate for Stellaris. And so, because the next version has been announced, what happened is there was a part of the team which went away and designed and built that in the background without telling anyone that the radial menu was going to be back in the game. And so it was a thing because they knew that I would panic, most likely, where I'd sort of said, radial menus, no, we're not doing radial menus. We've all said we're not doing radial menus. And so a fully finished radial menu was presented to me and said, isn't this great? And I said, yes, it is. And that was the end, really. But as far as design documents and conversations or anything good like that, it just appeared one day. And it's excellent, but it was not, yes, as far as the that hypothetical conversation Mr. Doe had about speaking with me about, we should speak to David about it. No, it didn't happen at all.
That's a good example of a new interface that doesn't step on anything else. It does not get in the way. You can continue to play. I mean, I don't know. Well, we can't show it right now. But in 2.8, there is a system context-based radial menu that is being described here. And if you didn't know it existed, you wouldn't miss it. But when you know it's there and you start using it and you go off and play the PC version, you really miss it. And I think that's pretty funny.
Speaking of that, we have
just throw some shade.
I mean, I think it's important to reiterate and come back to what we discussed previously, right? Is that the design process is quite different, and the premise of playing a game on a console is vastly different. You have a different type of screen, you have a different type of controller set. Everything from input to display is vastly different in many instances. And we talked a little bit about that briefly before, but to continue on with this Mobius Y question here, does the team have to consider the potential impact of these additions as we continue to interact with this UI layer, so to speak? What is your answer there?
Yes.
Replay the game so much.
So all I was going to say is, as far as quality of life improvements, we need to make sure that we're not shortcutting gameplay as well, because there are things where we can automate which actually diminishes the game rather than helps the game. So it's just how is the overall experience as we play it? Does is there still a challenge involved in this? Are we making things too easy? So we have to assess each quality of life improvement on its merits from the fact that we do play the game a lot.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Well, we have a lot of questions pertaining to the UI because it is one of the main aspects of getting Stellaris to work on a console. So Awesome Sheep 48 has asked, how do you go about designing the UI for console? I mean, we have touched upon this before, but also a little bit elaborating on, what other inspiration sources. We have talked about other projects that we're working on. Is there any other inspiration sources you work with to accomplish the stuff that we have done?
I think for me, we did so much work on Cities Skylines that a lot of that translated almost immediately over to Stellaris. But in terms of designing the UI, everything's fair game. We all play games in our spare time, and we cross genres. And even a game like Stellaris, well, it's very heavily space based. You might take inspiration from a game like FTL in the way that it presents its information. We take a lot of our design cues from current games, perhaps old games that some of our audience might not have been alive to experience when they were first released, and in terms of the design, I mean, I've gone through. I'll use a paint program, kind of draw up our overview of the new screens, and I'll get the PC version. I'll take those screens, and then I kind of end up stretching them and moving things around and taking off layers and adding more layers, and then eventually I've actually gotten down to the point where I've just had every single piece of a ship, of every ship type and every station type interaction panel on my desk out of Post-it notes, and just kind of shuffling them around until I made it sure that this is always in the same spot for all the ship types, and this is in the same spot for all of the station types. And it didn't make sense when I was doing it on the screen, so I was doing it out of Post-it notes. And often you can have just a conversation with somebody, and you walk past their desk and say, "Hey, what if we did this, that, and the other?" And if you talk to someone like Adam or another programmer, they can do it right in front of you on a live build, and you can make that decision straight away. So it's not just making a design document, it's also being in the studio, being creative, taking inspiration from other games that you play in your spare time, and seeing how all of those things kind of wrap in to make what we've got Stellaris so far. There's no one answer. We tend to throw a lot of it at the wall, and some of it sticks and some of it never makes it live, and that's fine.
We have gotten a few questions from the community. I'm gonna wrap them up a little bit because they all pertain to another subject that we already kind of discussed, and that is, the limitations and the restrictions and the specifications of the consoles themselves. So Riot Guy, amongst a few other people and players out there, have asked if there was ever to be considered any type of cheat systems, enabling console commands that we have for the PC. Could you elaborate on why that is a hard thing to do, especially in terms of the compliance aspect on the consoles?
Yeah, it's because you can just pump the game full of assets so it crashes. And neither platform holder are very happy when their game crashes. And it just, I think in terms of adding cheats to Stellaris, it would be very difficult because it's such a complicated game. There's so much maths going on all the time. And, ultimately you can get to a point where it's just too much maths going on. And computers can only deal with so much of it. It'd be a very fragile system to implement a cheat system. For Stellaris, it's just too complicated. It's too complex to put in a live environment.
Yeah, and just to elaborate on that quite quickly is the fact that none of us playing Stellaris Console Edition would want the game to continuously crash for no apparent reason, right? So it's all down to it's really hard to design a system that wouldn't impact the player experience in any major negative way in that sense. So I definitely agree. It's not just surrounding what's possible on the console themselves. So we actually had a nameless community member input a very, very valid question. What DLC do you find the best or was the funniest to work with?
I have so many. I love I really loved Utopia. Working on Utopia was was almost a dream come true because I had spent so much time playing the PC version and seeing that come to life on the console. And then I loved Megacorp. I really loved the way that changed up the gameplay, and we changed the way the tile system worked and the map system worked. And then I really love Federations. And there's some other stuff coming up that I really love too. But I love the active release. I love Utopia the most, I think.
I'm a big fan of the lithoids, but also giving them the necrophage origin. I think it's a very interesting combination, especially once you get a few extra gene traits unlocked and really customize them. Turning organics into rock people through a necrophage, I think, is pretty fun.
All right. Unfortunately, I think we're hitting our time limits here. I'd like to thank the crew over at Tantalus. Thank you so much, David, Adam, and David, for tuning in and letting us all know more about how it is bringing Stellaris to console. And thank you for tuning into this talk. There will be more content upcoming after this, so stay tuned and let's talk soon.
So, you've heard from me in the home studio, and now it's handing over to me, not in the home studio, here to talk about YouTube and Twitch in a content empire. Well, Burke, you know I'm a fan. I'm so glad to have you here. Watching you on Twitch is definitely something I enjoy, not only in my personal time, but in my professional time, so I hope we get to work together again. But we also have with us one of my favorite YouTubers of all time, one proud Bavarian. Say hi to the folks.
Hey! Hello there.
Today we'll be talking about how to build a streaming empire, as it were. How to build your content and build your channel. As you know, most of you know, these are two of our most prolific streamers, not just for the game, but for our community. So I figured I'd ask them on today to chat a little bit about how they created this entire channel, their community, and how they support you guys moving into the future. So I just wanted to know, guys, are you excited to be here? Are you happy to be at PDXCON?
Of course. Holy cow. I can't wait to see what you guys have in store, because every time we come here, it's always something crazy and you're going to reveal some stuff and it's always exciting times.
I can only agree. I'm very excited because I missed PDXCon last year a lot. I was there in 2019 in Berlin. It was amazing. So I can only hope that, in this PDXCon we also get a full package essentially.
Yep. And can I just say that I'm the least dressed individual in this entire ensemble right now? I'm kind of jealous.
Nah. I think you look business expense. You look perfect.
Business expense and everyday wear. I like how it's the dichotomy between the two. It's really good. So, for those of you that follow YouTube, for those of you that follow Twitch, you guys know their names, OPB and Burke Black. From what I understand, you guys didn't really have a platform to start from. You both started from scratch. So would you mind telling me a little bit about what got you into streaming, how you started this experience, and what got you up to where you are first and foremost in the entire streaming platform, but your community, because that's why we're here, is to talk about the community. And I'll let you guys figure out which of you wants to go first.
I'll let the pirate go first. I don't want to get raided.
Don't worry. We only do that after the show. How you got started? I can honestly, I was doing something in real life that did not pan out, and a friend of mine was like, you're an entertaining kind of character. Why don't you try this live streaming thing? And I didn't think nothing of it, so I just, I think I was playing some strategy games, and I just booted up that stream one day. And what I started liking is that I didn't really you can't do this stuff planning that you're going to make, you're going to make all this money and everything. It doesn't work that way. You can't plan to make anything. You have to fall in love with the idea of doing it first. And for me, I just really enjoyed doing these strategy games, like Paradox games or other games like that. And seeing some people in chat comment to me about what's their experience, or cheering me on, oh yeah, you're gonna get the crown from the king, you can do it, man, or maybe if you go and try to deal with the Ireland, you could build a power base there. And I was like, yeah, that'd be cool, let's try that, It's just the communication with actual people. I got into that. That's the first part of any kind of building anything, is loving the actual act of doing it before you ever there's so many guys that are like, I'm going to make so much money doing this. They fizzle out in 3 months because they don't make anything. I didn't make any money for the first 6 months. And that was a $60 tip from a guy. I was like, hey, that was cool. Here's $6. And I was like, what?
Did you then go and buy that guy a pizza? Because it seems like he might have deserved a pizza at that point.
No, I bought a game. I instantly bought myself a game. It was $60. This is amazing. It's a time, I maybe was lucky to get a single game, but instantly bought myself another game. I was like, all right, we're going to stream this game. And then it just, everything that was given to me on that stream, I went right back into the stream. I don't think I bought anything for myself for years. It just all went back into it because you needed to. I started such a terrible journey. I made it so much harder for myself than it needed to be. I had a crap mic. I had a crap webcam. I had a crap setup. Half the time, people were watching me, couldn't even tell what the hell I was doing on the stream because it was so pixelated, and I never even stopped the time to see if the stream was watchable or not. So, first piece of advice. Do your research before you do it. There's a lot of people out there that do this live streaming stuff that say they could start off with a shotgun, meaning they get you don't have to spend a lot of money. There's tons of free stuff out there. When I started in 2013, there was nothing. You couldn't Google this stuff and find it. There was nothing. You had to really deep dive to find anything, or even ask other streamers at that time, and they didn't like helping nobody back then, okay? But now you have so many resources, free art panels that people give out, free overlays, so many YouTube videos to help you get your bitrate correct so your stream doesn't look like garbage. So much quality microphones made now that are cheap, and cheap webcams too that you could get that make you at least look good, or don't even use a webcam. It's up to you. Sky's the limit on this stuff. So
definitely,
my journey was
literally the limit.
Rough.
Is the sky,
It was rough at the beginning, and the rocket up was, as my friend Ferretbaum would say, the streaming is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yeah.
So
definitely,
I never had a rocket that just took me up to success. I had a couple of games that just I was doing Fallout 4 DLC when no one else was doing it, and I got a following on that, and then Stellaris.
and then of course
I did that.
Then of course Crusader Kings, right, Burke? Right, Burke?
Of course, Crusader Kings. That was actually a really good stream. That was a very good stream there too. But just make it entertaining for people to watch. You make it. Ask yourself, would I watch myself? Would you watch your own show? If you don't find yourself entertaining, then why would anyone else?
Exactly. And I know I saw both of you guys in 2019 at PDXCon. Then I was on the other side of the fence. I was just hanging out, being that guy that knew everyone at Paradox. So it was really interesting for me, coming from a community background, coming from community management, seeing how you guys had built your empire. And even at that time, I really wanted to get a chance to talk to you. So this is kind of like, I wouldn't say a fanboy's dream come true, but this is definitely a community manager's dream come true, is seeing somebody that has built their empire, has done the work, has put in the time, has built the fan base and the following, and made sure that you are part of your community as well as a leader in your community. And it's really a unique experience for me to be able to actually talk to you guys and get in here and dissect and see how your brain works. And, it is hard work. It is something that you have to build from the ground up. And I appreciate you guys and respect you both for doing that, because you've both welcoming all of your new community to the environment that we have. You're very happy, you're very friendly, but you also are knowledgeable. And that's something that I respect. I definitely look for in my community members. And so thank you from the community at whole. But now it's time for OPB. What got you into streaming?
So for me, it was much more recent. I started in 2018, and I will be brutally honest here. I started because I was playing these games anyway. I said to myself, I might as well, record it. I might as well stream it. I did a lot of different things that I tried out on the channel. It was all Paradox, because I was playing mostly, EU4. I was playing Hearts of Iron 4. I was playing CK2, of course. And I will say what Berg said earlier. I think that is really, it rings true. I didn't really have any, motivation. I wasn't really like, this is where I want to end up. This is the quality that I want to deliver. And I think that was a problem for a long time. I started, a while afterwards, I started to just look back every week or every other week. And I said to myself, what did I like about my content for this week? What did I not like? What would I like to keep doing? What would I like to stop doing? And that is, I think, something that really contributed to me being able to actually see this as more than just me saying, I'm playing these anyway, I just want to, record myself or stream during it, where it became, there started to be a bit of a level that I wanted to reach, that I wanted to achieve. And that is something that has accompanied me ever since. My wife always says the Pareto principle, which is essentially the 80-20 rule. It means that when you sit down and you want to do something, you want to achieve something, 80% of the result will be achieved with just 20% of the work. And you just need to identify what this 20% of the work is. As it was said earlier, I mean, don't go back and start watching my old episodes, please, because terrible mic, terrible everything, basically. I think my recording quality wasn't that bad, but everything else was really bad. But it's one of those things where once you identify that you have certain factors like the mic, like the recording in itself or the stream in itself and how you interact with chat, that sort of stuff, you can identify that, and that is pretty easy. For me in particular, because I'm very, very active on YouTube itself, there are a lot of other things that also play a role, like the thumbnail, like everything that goes into the description, what sort of themes you set for your streams or videos. And I will say that that is essentially the rest of the work. So 80% of the work that give you 20% of the gain at the end of the day, but you want a complete package, so you got to really work fully on it. And I think at the end of the day, for me, I've pivoted a bit. I've moved on. I really enjoyed some very recent CK3 streams that I've done just because it's so much fun to have people talk to you about, hey, let's do this, let's do that, just like Berg already highlighted. And that is something that you will always find in your niche. If you do content creation, you will have to look at yourself, say, this is my content now, but it might not be in 10 months. In 10 months, I might be somewhere else. There's definitely, just like he said, it's a marathon. There's a necessity for longevity in your content. You can't just go and say, this is it, I'm going to explode, and then I'm going to go wild, I'm going to have millions. Instead, you got to be, okay, this is my project, and I'll see what I like about it, I'll see what I don't like about it, and then I move on from there. For me, what really has grown on me is scripting. So I essentially write scripts. I record something in the recent weeks and months. It's been a lot about CK3 mods. It's an incredible modding community. I can only really push that further. It's insane. I've talked to so many modders. I'm in so many modding discords. I'm keeping track of so many projects, and they're truly outstanding. There's a new level of cooperation as well. And talking about that, highlighting the work that they put in, showcasing what is going on there, I think that is something that I would say is, for me, currently the project that I enjoy the most, primarily because it's something where I can give back as well. Obviously, as a content creator, you have a platform, and I would like to use, for example, that platform in this case to just say, hey, have you heard of the mod that I don't know, brings a truly epic world into CK3 that would have never otherwise existed. It's a lot of fun. And I will say that at the start of my journey, and this is where it comes to, your content today and your content tomorrow, I hated editing. I never edited. I hated it with a true passion. As you have to sit down, you have to be like, oh God, what am I going to cut? Do I need to change the sound level here? It's annoying. But once you start doing it, once you do something where you see, hey, this is really, I want this video to happen and I need to learn something about it, you can put in the work and you can get it out there. It's 100%. I can really only agree with Burke on this. It's a marathon and you need to keep making sure that you do things that you enjoy and that you think are things that you really actually want to do. I can do that I enjoy, or I can do things that I enjoy, but at the end of the day, if I just, do them halfway and not full way because I'm not fully committed, then it's going to come out poorly. And that's definitely not what you want because people will notice, you will notice. And to be here for a long time, to do this for a long time, you need to start doing things in a way that you enjoy and not just the process of, but also the results. So yeah, at the end of the day, definitely make sure that you understand what you have in front of you, what you like, and then what needs to be done and what might be able to wait, for a bit longer, just in case that you're already in a position where you do good content, but you can make it a bit better. Some things can wait. I think some things can just wait, being able to do the proper right transitions and that sort of stuff, for example, in editing, being able to have an amazing scenery. I've seen so many streamers. It's actually insane what's going on with some of the sceneries that they have in, behind them, that sort of stuff. Postpone that stuff. Just focus on what you think is really primary right now and then do that. That's my biggest hint or my biggest advice in that regard, because otherwise you're just going to get lost in the details, or at worst, you're not even going to get into the details because you're going to lose interest. You're going to say, oh, I didn't have any success. I didn't enjoy what I did, and neither is good. So definitely make sure that you find the balance there.
Right, and balance not only in the systems that you're working in your community, but also in work life. I know it's really tough for you guys, especially with the current state of events, to keep that energy and that passion driving towards your community. And we thank you for it again. But what has one of the biggest struggles been for you guys over not just the past year, but throughout your career, and making sure that you keep that balance, keep that steam, and make sure that you're continuing towards a better, brighter future?
Oh, geez. The last year.
Gotcha.
Honestly, I think the big thing was to just not make the channel about that. I wanted it to be an escape for people so they would come there and not have to think about that stuff, but just watch some goofy pirate guy do some stupid stuff to make them laugh.
Definitely.
So that was kind of my focus throughout the year. I mean, it showed up a couple times in chat where we talked about it, but for the vast majority of the time, it was escapism for people that were watching. As for my personal struggles, I think it's, I'm at a place that I think every streamer understands where I'm coming from, where, you're always at that moment where you think this could all end tomorrow. I think what live streaming and playing video games and making people laugh and making a career out of that is like a true blessing. Like that's a dream. It's not like, you're not doing strenuous work. You're not doing a 9-to-5 job. At worst, what we have is mental exhaustion. Like you're mentally, you'll be exhausted from what you do, but you're not doing back-breaking work here. You know what I'm saying? Right. That's not to just take away that it does have a work mentality to it. There is a lot that you put into a stream. There's a lot that you have to think about and plan and strategize because you want to make sure that you have an audience. But you're always fearful that you're going to look at that number and see 0 viewers instead of your normal viewers. And that's always the scary thing. So maybe my personal struggle is that I've maybe focused on that overkill. It's always a worry on my mind. I'm always worried that a joke's gonna fall flat and nobody's gonna laugh, or it's gonna be an awkward situation, or I'm gonna play something and then the audience is just gonna disappear because honestly, at this point, I can't even play games without them. I have to have Twitch chat there. I can't even function without them now. I try to play games offline, and then something cool will happen, and I'll be like, "Oh man, that was."
Look for the chat, and it's not there.
Yeah. They're not there. And so now I'm attached to them. And I think a lot of viewers don't even realize when you get used to seeing names pop up in your chat, and then they just stop showing up, and you're like, "Oh, what happened to Legolas 49? I don't see him anymore. Where'd he go?" Like, you don't like that feeling. It's a crap feeling because you get attached to those usernames. I'm sorry, but you do. It happens. And that's part of the mess as well. I love those little monsters.
And that's something that definitely shows through on both your communities is that sense of belonging, that sense of I am here, I'm interacting with the stream. That's definitely something that comes through in your work. So good job on that, definitely, for real.
Yeah. It's tough to, I knew right away I didn't want a community of just like people spamming memes. Just being filthy or nasty. I wanted a community that I could actually talk to, to get to know, And there's always going to be boundaries with that, It's not like I want somebody coming over for tea tomorrow. Like, hey, I watched you for 5 years. I showed up at your door. How you doing? We're best buddies, right? All right, pal. Let's not get crazy here, but you do get attached to people, and it's just fun to see them all the time, and I like that we have this ability to have a community that can actually talk and hang out and talk about nerd stuff or video games or strategies. I love that.
Yeah, and so that was that's why streaming is what it is now, is because of people interacting. It wouldn't be the same if we were just sitting there talking to the same 4 of our friends. To the generation that we all kind of grew up in was like, oh, I've got 4 friends who are going to come over on the weekend and play Mario Kart. And while that definitely still has a place, streaming gives us that ability to be like, this is my family. This group of people is my family. We're going to stream together. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, the pirates, exactly. But now, OPB. How about you? What has been your biggest hurdles or obstacles along the way?
I think for me it was definitely something personal related to being a content creator because, as it was mentioned before, it's something very unique. It's something that hasn't been around for a long time. It's a very young thing to do. And it's also, since it is so new, since it is something that hasn't been established, you don't really have a red thread to follow. You can't say, okay, I'm going to do it exactly like this. This is where you want to be when you're 30, when you're 40, when you're, wherever, and who knows how long it lasts. There's never certainty in that. But I do think, for me, a question that came to my mind was most certainly the idea, because I always like to look up. Now, not in a way as like, oh, why am I down here? Why is this so bad? But it's more like when you start growing, I hear this, I've never been to the gym. I've always been a skeleton. But what you hear people that go to the gym say is essentially, once you start working out, you will never stop perceiving yourself as small because you start saying, hey, but yesterday, I was considerably smaller and now, I can push it even further. And the day after, the yesterday was even smaller. So the way I see it,
true. Can verify that.
See, we're all avid gym goers, as you can see. But the way I see it, I really have the same perception of this. I have this sort of thing where I look up and I say, okay, what other content is out there? What do I do? What do I bring to the table? How does it compare? And that sort of stuff. And I think at the end of the day, that is something that is just naturally a part of me, of my personality, that I want to orient myself upwards. But at the same time, a big step for me was coming to peace with the fact where you are. Or where I am in this case. So that I say, okay, you know what, this is the community, this is the content that I make, and being happy with that while not giving up. That's just, where I'm personally coming from, while not giving up. Hey, of course, I want to do more, I want to do greater things, I want to get better at, streaming, editing, etc., etc. But I think a big topic of being in this sort of wild west of content creation where there aren't that many people that look to you and say, okay, here's everything you need to know, here's your 3 years apprenticeship of being a content creator, was definitely a challenge to sit down and say, hey, I can establish where I am, what I'm doing, and it makes sense. I'm not just lost in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, so it's the bleeding edge, living on that cusp of new technology, new creations, finding ways to innovate. And honestly, without you guys, I would be lost as a community manager, right? I look to you guys, my influencers, my community, that you guys are my models. What do you do that works? What do you say? How do you present yourself? How do you carry yourselves? And without you guys, honestly, community management would not be what it is. It's because of influencers, because of people creating content, creating these communities, that we have any idea of what it is that people want, what they want to see, who they want to see. yes, we do look to you when we look for numbers or we look for a good, positive environment. We know that you guys are going to provide that. That is something that we as community managers look to you for. But the same can be said, right? Without community managers, influencers would be doing their thing. And, I don't want you guys to be lost in the noise. I want to bring all of our influencers as high up as I can, bring you the recognition you deserve. On that note, trying to recognize all of that, how has the changing numbers, the changing popularity, and the changing content you've done, how has that affected and shaped you? Is that something that drives you, or is that something that you use to help guide you in the process?
Just to add to what you were saying about, us with influencers and community, I think just another really good thing about live streaming, because I can't really comment on YouTube because I don't really do that much. I have somebody that does my videos, so I could never do what he does. I can't do the editing and the planning and all that stuff. I'm not good at. I'm terrible at that.
Very few can.
Yeah,
that's why
I just do live stream. Exactly. I just do live stream and just wing it every night and just just see how things go. That's more my style, though. We're not a whole lot of planning. Just let it go and just have fun with it. But I think it's good that as gamers, we've always had the trailer. And the trailer got us all excited. We can't wait to get the new game because that trailer was awesome. And then so many gamers have been burned by trailers that, the trailer was, designed to make it look like something. And then they actually played it. And that segment was like 5 minutes of the game. Yeah. And now the rest of the game was just like, bleh. The great thing about live streaming is that they can literally sit there and watch you. You can't hide it. The game sucks. It sucks. You can't hide it. And I think that's just great for gaming in general, and great for developers, because when they're like, "Hey, we made a great game, and this is something that you can just watch to see if is something you'd be interested in." And I think that's wonderful for the entire industry, that people could just now get an unfiltered look at games, and they don't have to have, they don't have to watch a trailer or something just to get an idea if it's going to be something that they would want. And they can actually talk to someone playing the game if it's something that's going to be valuable to them in the long run, because, the $60 is still $60, But and now I turned myself around. So the question was,
how has the community influenced you, or is it just a guidepost that you use to steer your career?
Oh, my community turned me into this. This is literally because of my community. We were playing Grand Theft Auto. My perceptions on how streaming and how you should be, I didn't know. I followed role models like Total Biscuit, Angry Joe, people like that. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying like, oh, I got to give reviews for games, or, I have to play games like, like the Man versus Game. I have to play games on the hardest difficulty. I have to be the best.
Prove yourself.
And I quickly learned I was terrible at all that stuff. Everything that I thought that I wanted to do, awful. I did reviews that were garbage because I don't know how to articulate my opinion on games. Ultimately, my value is: am I having fun? Yes, me like game. Me not have fun. Me no like game. Yeah. It's pretty much as blunt as I can be about it, man. So over time, I just kind of listened to chat, and chat was more about fun and goofy and having laughs. So I focused on a lot more on that stuff. And then the whole pirate thing came because chat was just, really, we were playing Grand Theft Auto, and in that you're a crew, right? Yeah. So my username has always been Burke Black on everything that I've always played, because my dad named me that from Star Wars Galaxies back in the day. If you remember that game.
There you go. Throwing it back.
I was a bounty hunter, and I was Burke Black, right? So, my crew, we created the Black Crew in that, and we themed it after pirates, because we were anarchy and chaos and do what we want, because a pirate is free, and it just kind of took off. They just started calling themselves the pirates, and I was like, I'll be your captain then, and it just exploded. It just became a thing. So that's something that my crew or my community's inspired, pushed me toward, and it makes me want to provide better content for them now, because I want them to have that funness, something that they can watch with their kids and have a laugh. And the strategy of streaming, there's a lot of strategy to it.
Definitely.
You can't just stream whatever you want and expect to get eyes on your channel. It doesn't work that way. There's a great just general guide, and I've followed this in my streaming career, and it's always worked for me. It's different from me now because obviously my viewership is different from then, so it doesn't apply the same. But I've always liked, how like if using Twitch as an example, because I couldn't tell you about YouTube.
I'll do that in a second. No worries.
We'll get to YouTube in just a moment.
Yeah, for Twitch, like I when you go to browse games and there's that category of games, right? I would usually ignore that first 5 rows, and I would stream all the games 5 rows down, but not go 5 rows below that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like 5, row 5
that
to
middle
10.
ground. Yeah.
That middle ground. That's where you're going to find people that want to watch because the big dogs ain't streaming those games necessarily, where your small channel is going to be drowned out by tons of other streamers. And you can find a place or a niche very much like Paradox games are fantastic streaming games, especially for small channels. I know I'm at PDXCON, and I'm saying this, but there is a wonderful community out there of Paradox community players that will tune into small channels all the time to see what you're doing because your playthrough is going to be different than everyone else that's on that channel right now.
Right.
Paradox games are fantastic niche games for streaming on Twitch and building an audience. They're great for that.
Definitely. And that's where, YouTube and Twitch kind of differ. Twitch is more of live and on the go, and you have to tact constantly to be ahead of the curve. But I know that YouTube gives a better snapshot. You can see what people like right off the bat and kind of use that as a guide. But I know it's not that cut and dry. It's not that straightforward. And OPB, how have you found that for your community? Have you used it as my community wants to see this, I do more of this, or have you used it to try and encourage further participation?
Right. I'm a really stubborn guy. So when I create content and like when I do videos, when I do streams, I like to say, and this is I'm not talking myself out of my head here in terms of my community, because I say this very openly. I talk a lot in my Discord, for example. I talk a lot in my YouTube comment sections. I did those videos, for example, on the dev diaries before the game was released. There was a huge FAQ. We went through that and we talked about that as a community. So there was all that sort of stuff in that where I really enjoy seeing the community feedback, because obviously I live in a bit of a bubble. I have a very strong opinion on what games I would like, what I would like to see in the game, etc. Right. But I would also like to hear what others say. But when it comes to my actual content, I definitely read comments that suggest things that tell me what I should do and what I could do. But at the end of the day, you kind of know you work on this for hours and hours and hours, and most people that just leave a comment don't. Now, I know that sounds very dismissive, but the way I see it is just I set out with the streams, with the videos. Personally, I set out with a bit of a vision where I say, this is what I want to do today. This is what I want to talk about, what I want to sort of put into the center. And there is a community dialogue, and I really, really enjoy that. I'm a huge fan of that because it really makes it so that I can see perspectives that otherwise I wouldn't see. But at the same time, when it comes to my content itself, it's definitely more driven by what I want to do. I've pivoted very heavily in the last year or so when it comes to the videos that I make. Now it's really, really a lot of editing, a lot of scripting. And again, the streams that I really, really enjoy, I can only recommend. I also have to say I have the deepest respect for Berg, because this sort of streaming, and he says, it's exhausting, but it's not the same as like heavy work. And obviously that's true, but at the same time, oh my God, I could not imagine streaming every day. My brain after 4 or 5 hours of streaming is fried. It is done. And on the other hand, if you edit content, right, you can, I'm going to go and just take a walk. I'm out of here. I'll see you later, because there's nobody watching there. There's nobody there in the moment. There's no necessity that I am there on air for 5 hours or something. I can split it up. I can have some breaks. I can have some pauses. And that's definitely more my speed as like regular content, as much as I enjoy streaming. But I would definitely say when it comes to the nature of my content and what I do, there's a lot of thought that goes into it from what I want to have as a creative sort of vision. But at the same time, oh my God, I love the tip for the, select the games that aren't the most popular ones, because that's where the huge streamers are and nobody really goes anywhere else. For example, it's like the famous flavor of the month. You want something where there is a community around it, for example. and on YouTube. Oh my god, it's a lot of numbers crunching. I'm not gonna lie about it. There's a lot of monitoring. I think YouTube made it spectacularly easy to actually see things. For example, how often do people see your thumbnail, and how often do they then click through it? And if it doesn't work, I've made great thumbnails. I thought they were great thumbnails, and they get horrible click-through rates. That's what that number is, and obviously that makes me sad. But it also means let's change it up. Let's see what works. And on that note, I can give one tip: if you make content on YouTube, don't make the content on YouTube for people that are already searching for it. Make the content for people that might be interested in it but don't know it yet, because the algorithm really is your friend. And I know that especially smaller YouTubers are like, oh, the algorithm doesn't want to promote me. I hate this. And I get it. Really sucks. It's a bad feeling. But at the same time, there's only so many people that actually search for the words CK3 mod. I don't know. What did I do? I did so many mod showcases. Lord of the Rings, for example, right? There's only so many people that search for it. But there's so many more people that the algorithm is like, hey, I know that 5 years ago you watched Lord of the Rings, the clip where Aragorn hits the helmet and actually breaks his foot. Did you know that? Yeah. And in that case, I would say that just trust the algorithm. Make something where the people aren't sure that they want to know this, but they are likely to know about it. So yeah, it's definitely a different experience with Twitch, but I think that there is a lot of strategy in both. And I must admit, I have a lot of respect for people that really do this full-time streaming, because my God, it's exhausting. People don't realize this, but to talk for that many hours, it's an experience. It certainly is.
Yeah, I mean, even sitting in the studio filming is really tough, because getting out there, getting in front of a camera, keeping a positive attitude. Well, that's the default for most people that we participate with in the community and influencers. We want to see positivity, right? We want to see people that enjoy being there. Well, that's definitely our primal set. That's where we live, is happy and positive. It is very difficult to keep that environment up and going on stream, but it's also hard, I know, on YouTube to keep that tone even, right? It's you don't want to go from one clip that's super excited to, oh yeah, I'm here playing the game. And reshoots are definitely a thing that I can see being an issue. But we've gone through the highs, we've gone through the lows, we've gone through tips for beginners. We've gone through thank yous for you guys, which I'm going to do again in a little bit. But our final thoughts here. We're almost out of time. We haven't got much time left to chat with you guys. I would love to do this all day. I would love to sit and talk with you all day, communicate, have a conversation, sit down, drink some tea, and find out what makes you tick. We're always welcoming you on the Discord. We're always welcoming you on Twitch and YouTube. So definitely keep posting that content. But one of the questions I have left very shortly for you guys is, in the future, what is one thing that you're hoping to get out of the streaming platforms or YouTube platforms? What is one thing that you hope to drive towards in the future? What is one goal that you hope to achieve, whether it be within the next year or within the next 5 years?
See, that's funny that you bring that up, because I'm working on the future now. For me personally, I'm building a studio that I just kind of want it to be. It's always been this dream of mine, because now that I'm into the whole live streaming thing, I really always wanted to dive into it really head on. But never. I've been saving for. I've been living in the same house for like 28 years, and I just moved out to this new place. So nice. Getting this opportunities all because of live streaming on Twitch in my community. So now I actually have a space in a nice basement that's going to be transformed into a pirate studio. And I'm going to have a live cabin, and there's going to be a big VR area and board gaming for Warhammer 40K stuff, and just a lot of goofy stuff that I've always wanted to do, but never had the room to do it. And basically, I just want to keep taking the bar up on Twitch. I want to get more creative, do more innovative things, more theatrics. I love theatrics. I don't like being the streamer that just sits there and just plays the game. I want to get crazy and really blow people's minds. I want if somebody comes into that channel and they see me in front of that live pirate scene, right? With it's going to have windows, and it's going to have like shelving. It's going to be made of wood. It's going to look like a real cabin. And if somebody comes in there and they go
in the corner.
Exactly. If they come in there and they look at me and they go, is he actually on a ship in the Caribbean?
Right.
I can't. Is he really? I feel like I've done my job at that point. Like, that's what I want. I want that sense of the disbelief. And as far as the future goes, I mean, I have no idea. You know, it's like it's just like he was saying. It's such a new thing. I don't think it's ever going to die out. I think live streaming is here to stay. I think the idea of watching this content, regardless what Bill Maher says, is entertaining to people.
Right. That's definitely
I think people
why I have a
find
job.
entertainment. Yeah, I think people find things entertaining regardless what it is. Anything could be a waste of time. Anything, playing kick the ball back and forth is a waste of time. But if you're having an enjoyment in something and it's entertaining to you, that's all that matters. Right. So I don't think live streaming is ever going to be something that fades away or goes away. It could change. It could be different formats, Twitch could shut down tomorrow and something new would take its place. But I don't think any of this is going anywhere. It's definitely here to stay. And what that future holds for it, I honestly don't know because we don't have anything to base it on. I don't know what else to say. Like, this is where this platform is very much like this. So this is where it's going to go. I don't know. But I am here to stay. Right. I have no intentions of leaving. I could do this forever. I love it too much to just be like, all right, see ya, I'm out. Not to say that if I get older as a man, I might take more days off and cut some hours. I'm sure I'll probably end up doing stuff like that. 10 hours a day every day except for one day is that's a lot of hours. But that's all I could possibly see. But my audience, I'm assuming, will grow with me just like the Rolling Stones audience did with them, right?
Exactly.
Well, I'll be 80 years old. They'll be 80 years old. And we'll all be like, hey, let's see the Call of Duty 27. It's looking real good. Yeah, it's ready to play that.
And I know we're both looking forward to it. What about you, OPB? What are you looking forward to in the future? What does the future hold for you?
In 2 years, I'm going to check where Berg Black is so that I can then say in 5 years I'm going to be there because, currently no red thread, but once Berg has done it, I can take that as an inspiration. But yeah, no, for me, I mean, to put it into numbers, I guess, because obviously I want to do this for as long and as successfully as possible because it's a lot of fun. It's something that you don't really encourage or rather find anywhere else. But at the same time, to put it into numbers, I would like to collect at least one, otherwise as many play buttons as I can because, one day when I'm old, I'm going to be like, look at this, nobody else got it, but here we have it. And that would definitely be the starting point where I then start telling the kids, hey, okay, here's my 50-minute story about how I used to be on YouTube. But who knows where that goes, for how long it lasts. Again, I would like it to last for as long as possible. I mean, who wouldn't? And beyond that, just in general, being able to try out new things is something that I'm very interested in, that I basically value, in this job above all other things. I've never considered myself a creative person, but weirdly enough, everything that I've learned about, Premiere, about After Effects and so on and so forth, I would like to learn more and then hopefully put that out so that one day I can look back and say, hey, this actually looks like a totally professionally created video right there. Or, again, stream. I'm also looking into that at the same time. I would like to step it up, have this sort of energy that Berg has going on streams as well. But that is all stuff, essentially for me, to sum it up, I just would like to improve. That is the fun in it for me, and that is where I want to keep it, yeah.
Well, boys, while that doesn't sum it up, I think that gives us a good idea of not only where you've been, but where you are and where you're going. I, for one, definitely look forward to seeing both of you in the future. Can't wait to work with you again. I know it's been a blast. It's been a fantastic ride so far. And there's only more in the future in store for all of us, including Paradox and including the entire streaming community. So, Berg Black and One Proud Bavarian, thank you so much for joining me today.
Cheers.
Thanks for having us, man. Appreciate it.
And for you at home, definitely make sure that you tune in. Check out One Proud Bavarian. Sorry about that. So you at home, make sure you tune in and check out One Proud Bavarian on YouTube and Berg Black on Twitch and follow along as you make sure that they're giving you the best bang for your buck in the community, as well as join them on their journey and their road to see what the hubbub is and how you can better shape your community based on the models and the role models that they've given you. Thanks, guys.
Hello, and welcome to Together for Victoria. This is a panel in which we'll be talking the history of the Victoria series, sharing some development stories from previous games, and just chatting a whole bunch about Victoria in general. With me, I have Don Lind and Henrik Hansson. So, Don, introduce yourself and tell us, why are you at this panel?
So I got roped into this apparently, but back in the day, I worked as a programmer on Wiki 2, and I was also, I think we called it project lead back then for some of the expansions. So I have a pretty long history with Wiki, and I also helped out with Christmas patches and stuff like that after it was released.
Yep, and Henrik, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Hi. Yeah, so I worked on the Christmas patch together with Martin here and Don, and then also I was part of the initial setup of Wiki 3.
Yes,
did some prototyping and so on.
Sorry, as you might know, we are actually the Christmas patch team, and we'll be talking a bit more about that later. All right, so I'm thinking we'll start a little bit by actually having you, Don, talk a little bit about sort of the background of Victoria 2 and as much as you can cover it, Victoria 1, because you have actually been out of Austria, you have been at Paradox the longest, and you've also had the most development history on Wiki 2. I was on the last expansion and, the Christmas patch, but you were actually with the project earlier than that, right?
Yeah, so I was there from scratch, actually. I wasn't involved in Victoria 1. I think the only people who were working on that, who are still at Paradox, are Johan and Henrik Fores. I think that's probably it. It was a pretty small team. For Wiki 2, I was in there from the beginning as a programmer. That was a long time ago now. It's like 10 years or something, right?
Oh yeah, you did quite a bit of work on the original economy code, didn't you?
Yes, we all did. I feel like we're going to be talking a lot about the old economy code today.
Oh boy,
probably.
I mean, it is a little bit of the elephant in the room if you're talking about Wiki 2. So I don't think we should feel shy in sharing our hurt.
No. But
So were you
I can
also
start with the basic stuff.
Hmm?
Yeah. So back then, usually when we started a new game, we took the latest game we had, and we basically started modifying that to make a new game. But for Wiki, we wanted to sort of have a map that was more like EU and EU3 in this case. So we took, if I remember correctly, the Hearts of Iron 3 code base, and then we spliced in Divine Wind. So there was like diplomacy and some of the politics and stuff from EU, plus the map melded with Hearts of Iron to make the core of the game, basically.
All right. How long was the development of the original before all the expansions?
So what I've managed to glean from like spreadsheets that I've poked Johan about, it seemed to have been about 9 months for the base game. And we had something like 7 to 9 people on the project, depending on the time of it.
And
so this was this was, I think, actually fairly long for back then. Now it feels extremely short, I have to say.
Yeah, a bit different from now, to be sure. But Henrik, you were not actually on Wiki 2 in any, so to speak, official capacity, correct?
No, I mean, I was just a big fan of the game, so I did dig through the code while I was not working on it. So we did get to the just wanting to know how certain things worked, and then eventually you and Don started working on the Christmas patch, I think, and then I was like, I have some issues I want to fix, things that have been bothering me a lot. So yeah, so I joined in on that and fixed, for instance, the bug where you're if you embark your troops on ships, they would just disappear in multiplayer. So like that, like, because I always got trapped by that, and then I had like 1,000 on 1,000 of troops just gone from the game until I reloaded the save. So yeah, I did get to fix some issues with it.
Right, but before we talk more about the Christmas patch, let's actually tackle that big old elephant. Let's talk about the economy code and our own experiences with it. Seniority, so Dan, you go first.
All right. So the design we set up for it was supposed to be this closed system. So Wiki 1 had a pretty gamey economy, but we wanted to try and make a more real economy for Victoria 2. So we made this closed system where money doesn't get injected from somewhere, for example, at least not initially. And as it turned out, that was incredibly hard and also incredibly performance intensive, because I think when we did this, I didn't even have a multi-core processor. I think it might have had hyperthreading maybe, but I'm not sure. So you couldn't really parallel size stuff when we made the base stuff at all. And I think probably the thing we spent the most time on was the economy code, because we rewrote it so many times for performance reasons. And for each rewrite, it became more and more hard to read.
Yeah, all the optimizations.
Yeah, and for every new person who joined the company, they usually went, "Hey, I got this idea. I want to fix the Victoria code."
Yeah, so I was just about to get to that. So that was my first experience with the Wiki 2 economy code. So I joined the Paradox in 2013, and at some point during that year, I was assigned to the Heart of Darkness expansion to work with you, Dan. You were the project lead on that. And, of course, being green and full of enthusiasm and like, I know what I'm doing. I can fix anything. I go, okay, I'm on Wiki 2. I love this game, but the economy is really broken. I'm going to fix the economy code. And you were like, you just looked at me and went like, yeah, good luck, basically. And then I think I came back to you the next day or something like that. Do you remember? And I went, yeah, you were right. Because just going into that code and even just trying to parse it, because, this is, of course, not the original code. This is after it's been, I'm guessing it was pretty complex and not that easy to read to begin with. But then, many optimizations and tweaks and changes to make it run better later, and just trying to follow how things happen in the buying order was a complete and utter nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, we even had bits I think we rewrote in assembler actually for performance, so that didn't help readability.
And actually, I think if you go by modern compilers now, which we didn't have back then, the assembly code there would actually make things slower, because it meant like the compiler would go like, oh, I can't optimize anything in here because I don't know what assembly code does. So it would actually, back then it would have made sense, but today, like, programming has become so different, and essentially like, multi-threading and so on just how you split up tasks to do, which we can do a lot better now.
Yeah, and of course, the economy code also contains the most infamous piece of code in all of, I would say, Paradox history. What's it called? The money injection bonsai?
Yeah, so yes, I figured we would end up there. That's why I talked about how the economy was a closed system where we never had to add money to it. Because as it turns out, we had bugs somewhere in that system where money disappeared. And we could not find where it was, I mean, for years. I think maybe Henrik found some of it.
I found one
as we were starting up Caligula. But like, the core problem was that we were leaking money somewhere and we could not figure out what it was. And the solution that we needed, which was, I think, the week before release, was we need to get the money back in somehow. So I remember it because like one of the programmers, Frederick, on the team then was him and I was looking at it, and it was kind of late, and we were sort of almost ready with the Goldmaster version or maybe this was even for the patch, I can't remember. But Johan like put the bottle of champagne on the desk and went like, "Don't work too late, guys." So we drank the champagne, and we had this great idea for how to fix the economy, which was to make a variable called money injection banzai, and the title. So of course, because it was temporary, and we would just remove it later when we figured out the problems, right? But we never actually did. So that one's still in the game, basically.
I still think the comment
for
says...
every patch we did, we updated it.
Yes, I still think the comment says remove this later. To this day.
Yes. Comments that say that never get removed later. But no, I mean, it got smaller and smaller because initially it was quite a large number. And I think we even like added some sort of automated system because we could track how much money was lost total, but not where. So we actually had it adapt over time even, I think. And I don't remember who it gave the money to. I think it spread it evenly, but I'm not sure.
This is a very...
So it was
a very game development story, I would say. You have this hack, and the hack fixes the problem. You're supposed to fix it later. It doesn't get fixed, but the hack eventually gets adopted and becomes a system of its own. That I've seen that happen on numerous occasions. And, you know, if it works, it works. But yeah, that one, I remember running into that when I was parsing the code and going like, huh? What is this? And asking you about it. So
don't we have it printed on the wall at the office? Actually,
I think that was the previous office.
In one of the rooms.
Oh yeah, in the previous office.
Oh,
yeah, it was on the wall. Yeah.
Yeah, but not in this one, sadly. But it's still glorious. It's still in there on our old code servers. So another thing, as a bit of a favorite moment for me during the Heart of Darkness development, was when we tried very hard, mind you, to find out why the economy would crash if you spared China. And I remember us spending a fair bit of time investigating that, in the end eventually coming up with, we don't know. We're no wiser than when we started. But if I remember correctly, you solved that mystery, Henrik, when we were working on the Christmas patch, correct?
Well, I mean, I found it, but I didn't solve it.
Yeah,
It's a lot bigger problem to solve.
You found the answer, but you didn't fix it because the fix is a little bit complicated. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So essentially, because I had, I never worked on it, so I had more time to just like go through things to like just, I wanna, because it's fun to just read this and try and understand it. And I found that artisans, almost all of them switch their production at the same time. Would like, you know, so when return of investment of a product like becomes not valuable enough anymore, they'll go and switch. And China has so many artisans. So like when you do spare them, all of the cost and so on changes because of the regional pricing changing. So then they all go like, oh, I need to do a new production. Switch. And then they ruin the entire economy by doing that. And then they go like, oh, I need to switch again. And then they'll just keep doing this. Because they're trying to like, you know, find what am I supposed to produce? But it's like millions of people switching production at the same time.
Basically, half of China switches to producing furniture, crashes the price of furniture. Then they all switch to, say, steel, crashes the price of steel, and so on and so forth until they have ruined the entire world economy. I was very like, it finally makes sense because, it was very interesting to spend a fair amount of time on that and just come up with, And this, I think, illustrates, the Victoria 2 economy.
Yeah, because it's basically the same as, you know, when you load the save or when you, like, occasionally you'll get like a dump in the economy and you don't know why. And like, that is because the artisans are reevaluating. So, and that will cost that. So early game is a lot more prevalent and then like it gets less and less and less, but it is because at start they're all going to go like, oh, what am I supposed to be producing, and try and figure out something better, and the loading of a save triggers that, for instance. And then China is just that on steroids.
I just want to point out that I think it's part of it being an accurate simulation that it crashes once in a while and nobody understands why.
I mean, it doesn't crash for maybe the accurate reasons, but it does crash. It is an interesting aspect of it, to be sure.
Anyway, we should move on. And I'm actually thinking we have talked about it we have mentioned it several times. So let's talk a little bit about the Christmas patch. So this was, for those who are not familiar, the last patch done for Victoria 2. We did it in around Christmas 2015. And it was basically not an official patch, but rather the three of us on your initiative, if I recall correctly, Dan, getting together and making just like, we're just making this patch. So I'm actually going to ask you, Henrik, since you've gotten to talk the least so far, is like, tell us what you remember about the Christmas patch and why we did it, because I think you can speak for all of us there.
I mean, I remember us, like, I think Social Hour work complaining about like some small issues. And it's like, oh, it would be nice like if you could just right click on a country and get up the diplomacy screen like you can in most of our modern games now. Like small like quality of life things like that, and then like some bigger bugs that could be fixed and so on. And then we just like, started making it. We like dug up the old repository where the code was and just started working a bit slowly, but it wasn't like intended to be released at Christmas. It just became very fitting to do so, if I remember correctly.
I think we just happened to have some free time, right?
Yeah. That's how I remember it as well. It was we got talking about this towards like the end of November, start of December, and then we had some time and we pretty much sat down and just made I think you made a post in the forums and we asked people like, hey, we're going to make a sort of an unofficial patch. What do you guys want to see in it? And we got a bazillion replies and we sifted through it. And, it was everything from, oh, this is super doable, this is quality of life thing, to please rewrite the entire game, which is perhaps a little bit outside scope here. And in the end, I think we got a good list together. We implemented a whole bunch of it. I recall, I made the right-click diplomacy. Oh, God, I'm trying to remember what I actually fixed. It was a fair few things. I tried to improve capitalist AI.
I think the most important thing that you added is the polar bear purchase will now turn all pups in Iceland, Greenland, Jan Mayen into polar bears. I think that's the most important thing you added.
I mean, I was getting to Jan Mayen, but I guess we might as well talk about that here then. So, Jan Mayen interjection. So, I mean, of course, I'm the one who implemented this, but I would prefer to hear it from your perspective, Dan, since if I recall correctly, it was something I dropped on you after you made an offhand comment.
Oh, man, I don't exactly remember, but there was some talk about why there wasn't why Jan Mayen didn't exist on the map, right? Because it wasn't even on the map initially, right?
No, it was on the map. This was actually the opposite. I noticed that Jan Mayen was a thing in the game and that there were 12 people living there, and I think 18 actually. And I asked you, like, why is this a province? Like, why is this a province in the game with 18 people? It's not even inhabited today. And you were like, put on your best troll face, like, no, you're right. It should just be a province. It should be a country. And so I made it a country. So I went back to my computer, implemented it, and then I sent you a screenshot with Jan Mayen as a country and was like, done. Because, you're the project lead.
And you made the flag a polar bear, right?
Yeah, you're the project lead. You tell me it's supposed to be a country. I make it into a country. That's how development works. And it, had a blue polar bear, or the blue background with a polar bear by default, a red background with a polar bear for communists, and so on. It was beautiful. And, that was just the original. You could just release Jan Mayen and people had a bit of fun playing at this because it's a ridiculous country to play. You have no economy whatsoever. You have 18 fishermen, but they're highly literate fishermen. So you do get a lot of tech points. So you could become a secondary power. Yeah?
There's usually a guy making alcohol for the fishermen as well, right?
Yeah, there might be like one artisan or something. So yeah, you could, so even though you're this ridiculous little community of just a few fishermen and maybe one guy making alcohol, you do get a lot of tech points, which means that if you focus on the prestige techs, you can become a secondary power and then you can try to become a great power and lead John Mayen to greatness. And the fact that people thought this was a fun thing to do meant that we were like, okay, we should actually do something with this in the Christmas patch. And I think we did a little bit above and beyond. So it started, if I recall correctly, with me adding the polar bear purchase, which is a decision you can take that if you become a secondary power as Jan Mayen, you can purchase Greenland and Iceland from Denmark. And then you don't get a little bit of land. You still don't have a lot of pops, but you have something more than 18 fishermen. And then you added the polar bear culture and the polar bear leaders.
Yeah, I still can't remember if I painted the polar bear leaders or if I just painted one and then guilt-tripped the artists into making nicer versions of it.
I think it was the latter.
We ended up with, there's even like a separate admiral, right?
Yeah, with a pipe.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly.
Yeah.
So
I never got a 3D model though.
Oh yeah, no, unfortunately. But those were the heady days of the Christmas patch. But okay, so Polar Bear and John Mayen aside, what was your favorite addition that you made for the Christmas patch, Don?
I think the thing I remember most is me doing the crazy thing with World Wars. It was some idea that got stuck in my head because I wanted to sort of keep making it more and more sort of decisive, the war. Because I think I'd started thinking about Hoi 4 at this point. I was probably working on it actually. But you had a new invention that popped up, which was someone invented World War I basically, and it shifted a bunch of rules around how you could claim territory and stuff. And I remember it because my first implementation of it actually crashed that we released, so we had to patch it.
Yeah, the dangers of like unofficial patching with not that much testing on them. But, you know, it was a beta patch. It was an optional patch. And we sorted it in the end.
Yeah, I think we just dropped it on the forum, actually. It wasn't like...
Yeah, it was a zip file, wasn't it?
Properly for a while.
Yeah, it was a zip file, and eventually you managed to like find the old batch script to upload it to Steam, if I recall correctly, because that... I remember we didn't have anything, because it was an older project, we didn't have anything as nice as all the automated stuff we have today. It was, you know, put these files here and edit this text file, run this batch script from Steam.
Yeah, and if it doesn't work, call Steam.
Oh yeah, call Steam when they're awake, which is not a lot during our office hours. What about you, Henrik? What's your favorite addition that you made?
Borderless window mode.
Yeah,
that took a lot of work to get that to work in the original Clausewitz engine.
That was some wizardry, actually.
Yeah, but that was my favorite because, like, otherwise, you know, it was the old style full screen where, like, if you tab, then it would reset everything in the screen, and like it was really annoying, and occasionally it would crash. So it was quite nice to have borderless window mode, so you could play it like on a modern computer and like browse the internet at the same time, you know, like you'd usually do. But I would say also my favorite change was probably what that you made, Martin, which is the, like, you don't get spammed with the event, you know, the tractor event.
Of course, yes. I spent quite a bit of time converting everything that was incredibly spammy in terms of events into more broader things, like election events became countrywide, because also it would be great to have an election event where it's like the people of Alaska decide, and this will not shift any election, but, you know, this happened. And yeah, and no more, every single province has to have tractors introduced to them, because, oh my God, all the tractors in Russia.
Do you remember when we fixed the sound from infrastructure upgrades?
I mean, I think I just...
If you remember that?
Didn't I just lower it to like 0.25, like 25% volume at some point or something? And I also disabled a couple other sounds because everything was like, a lot of the sounds were very, very, very loud and very like, ouch, my ears. I think that was Out of Darkness.
It was like for every province on the map sometimes.
Oh yeah, if you build all the railroads, then just play this 100 times over each other until your ears bleed. All right. But yeah, good times. But let's get back to the economy. So there's a favorite anecdote I would say that we kind of have about Victoria 2 versus Victoria 1, and that is the capitalists. In which game are they smartest? So, yeah. Do any of you guys want to volunteer to tell us this little anecdote? Because I think either of you knows it by heart.
I can do it. That's an oldie.
Yeah.
Or Henrik?
No, you do it. You worked on it.
All right. Yeah. So basically, on Wiki 1, capitalists would essentially, the way they would pick what to do is that they would essentially create a list and then remove everything that was impossible and then just roll the dice. So not very smart, right? But what they did in Victoria 2 was it tried to figure out what the best thing was. And they weren't always so good at figuring out what the best thing was, which of course is always dynamite, right? But so a lot of people thought that the Wiki 1 capitalist was way better because they didn't get stuck on dumb choices. Because if it's random, it appears that there's some variation. It appears like they're actually thinking through, testing different stuff. When in actuality, it's just random. And I think this is one of the great lessons about making AI, which is like, it's very easy to get stuck in like, what's it called? Like minimum, like smaller optimums, right?
Yeah.
And
as someone with a history of AI development, it's also one of my favorite anecdotes to like bring up to anyone who's going to get into AI. Is like, whatever you produce may not necessarily appear smarter than randomness, because it's, you know, it would, if you compare them, I would say that with all the like expansions and all the changes, the Wiki 2 capitalists on the whole make better decisions than the Wiki 1 random roll. But the Wiki 1 random roll will have occasional moments of brilliance, because it'll be like, I'm going to be this AI will just happen to roll exactly the thing that was super smart at the time. And players also tend to remember these sort of moments of brilliance more. So if one such moment of brilliance happened and then it made 5 dumb decisions, that might still stick. Whereas in Wiki 2, it'll make more consistently like middling decisions, which the player could always opt on and occasionally get stuck in making the same really dumb decision over and over and over, which is another thing that players absolutely tend to remember if the AI keeps failing consistently in the same way.
You mean like consistently building clippers?
I mean, clippers are beautiful. That was another thing. I tried to get the AI to stop using clippers and manowars in the Christmas patch, and I somewhat succeeded, but there's still screenshots of early 1900s clipper navies rolling around, so, you know, yeah. I mean, wooden boats are nice, okay? They're just nice. Let's actually move on from the economy, because we should probably talk a little bit about something else. Something I kind of wanted to ask you, Don, is we did make several expansions for Victoria 2, and you were somewhat involved in all of them. So I would like to ask you, like, which expansion features do you really think worked out? Like, what were the good ones that got added to the game? And which didn't work out?
Let's see. So I think probably my favorite one was probably the crisis system, which was combined with a new colonization system to essentially create these crises around the map. I thought that was a great system. It felt really appropriate for the game. And it was something we had talked about for quite a while, actually, of doing. But we didn't get around it until I think it was Heart of Darkness for that one. So that's probably one of my favorite ones.
Yeah.
My personal favorite that turned out to be perfectly honest, a bit crap, was newspapers. I had this great idea that it would be really cool to get all the events summarized and have some fun jokes and stuff in there. And I think I was the only person who liked that, actually.
It was fun for the first. It was always fun for the first few newspapers, but you get them so often, and they're full of okay, this is not, and they're full of repeats. So I think it's this kind of feature where, with enough time and polish and if you focus the stories a bit more, it could be really neat and maybe getting them less often. But it sort of ended up being just, oh, okay, I have a 99 unread newspaper as well. I'm not gonna be getting on that anytime soon. I will also say that the crisis system is something we've definitely taken inspiration from in Victoria 3 and built a very central feature to the game around, like quite similar. And yeah, they're working on Heart of Darkness there and just really liking the crisis mechanic. Very much inspired me for Wiki 3.
I'm looking at the list of bullet points actually from 2012 here. And I'm surprised by the fact that we apparently didn't have war justifications at game start.
No, there wasn't that.
I can't remember Victoria without justifications.
Wasn't that Heart of Darkness too? I remember us working on that.
No, it was House Divided apparently.
Oh, it's House Divided. Okay. Yeah. We are also, by the way, kind of running out of time, so we can hop on from this if you don't have any other sort of strong points. Do you have a favorite expansion feature, Henrik, or are you just going to mention sort of the same things?
I think I would, because I'm the kind of player that likes playing like Lost Causes. So I liked, for instance, a House Divided, like adding like a little bit more content for Texas, I think, if I remember correctly. And because, a lost cause and trying to win and like also tell the USA, no, I'm not going to join you. And I'm going to make this Republic of Ranchers and survive in the middle of America. Was always a lot of fun for me to play.
Yeah, I do.
So like a lot more content that the expansions added is what I liked.
Yeah, no, I also really like playing like tiny doomed nations and trying to make something of them. I think we have a lot of fun ones that you can play in Wiki 3. One of my favorites is Lanfang. Not on the level of Texas, but still. We'll get into that at some point. So something I just realized we've forgotten to bring up, and it's the single most important thing to bring up for sure, is of course the history of Fredrik's hair. And this is closely tied to the development of Wiki 2 and actually the very reason that Wiki 2 and Wiki 3 even exist. Dan, tell us about Fredrik's hair.
Okay. Okay. So fill in if I'm missing anything. But from when we were starting to make, or actually, I think before we even started making Wiki 2, someone asked Fredrik if it would be profitable. And he said, I don't think so, and I will shave my hair off if it is, right? And then it turned out that it actually worked out. So he shaved all his hair off live on stage in Germany, if I remember correctly.
E3.
We have sadly not found the video of this, though. Was it E3?
No. Yeah, E3 2010. I don't remember who it was that shaved it, but she, Fred linked to her on Twitter. I tried to dig up the video. I know it's somewhere on the internet, but I couldn't find it.
Oh yeah, so basically...
So you should make all financial gambles.
Fredrik lost his hair and we all gained Victoria 2 and Victoria 3, so I think that was a pretty decent trade, in all honesty. Right.
And Gamasutra did ask him. Gamasutra did ask him, like, why did you approve a game that you didn't think was going to turn profit? But it was like he answered Gamasutra with it's because of the passion the fans have for the game, and we can see that with the Wiki 2 community and now also us within the company wanting to make Wiki 3. Like, there's a lot of passion behind this game.
Oh yeah,
Seriously.
I mean, as a Wiki fan, getting to helm Wiki 3 has been pretty goddamn amazing, and not being able to talk about it for several years has been, So, well, by the time you see this, it's all out in the open, and I'm super looking forward to it. But to wrap up, I'm going to ask the both of you a question, and then I will answer the question myself. What do you think is the biggest misconception around the entire Victoria series?
Yeah, so I think the biggest misconception is that the person who wrote the code left the company, which is wrong. I am pretty sure it was Johan that wrote it originally, and then there's been several people afterwards that have changed things, optimized, and so on. and and then because of this, nobody would know how the economy works. But I would say, like, we still have that internally, that knowledge, and I've never understood where that misconception comes from.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's misunderstandings on how code works, because we have all the code. It doesn't mean we understand it necessarily, or that whoever wrote it in the first place did.
Yeah,
or it might just be a story that's been sort of lost. It's like this weird, people find out this person moves on. That through the gamer's telephone is converted into this person who wrote the code moved on to, it's a story that kind of sounds good. The explanation makes sense in people's heads, so it spreads. So I think it continues to spread to this day, even though we keep going. No, that's not actually what happened.
So I think it's a little bit because Johan writes it originally, or whoever it was originally, and then there comes in Septoman, who optimizes the game a lot, and especially the economy code, and then it's not recognizable for whoever wrote it originally, because a lot of work went into trying to make that run smoothly. I think Don, you referenced that there were hyperthreading. I think there was some multi-core programming as well, in the economy, very slight, to just help it a little bit, for instance.
Yeah, there probably was. I just remember the original algorithm being made in a way that made it incredibly hard to use. I think it's also the wiki community has also not really had much content in many years. So I think this kind of mythology stuff grows out of that probably as well.
Yeah, but I do think that there is one bigger misconception around the Victoria series than the one you just mentioned. And that is the idea that Victoria 3 will never be made. Because Victoria 3, as you know by now, is not just being made, it's just been announced, and you can wishlist it on Steam right now. And with that, I want to thank you, Dan and Henrik, for being here today and for babbling all the wiki memories with me. And I will see you all soon.
Welcome. My name is Sanna and I'm part of the community team for Victoria. And today we're going to take a look at what Victoria 3 looks like. We're going to talk about the art of Victoria 3. And with me I have the perfect guest to talk about this, namely the art director for Victoria 3. Welcome, Max Sjöholm Elmberg.
Thank you, Sanna. Very nice to be able to talk about the art that has been going on in Victoria 3. Because a lot has happened since Victoria 2 launched. And
to say the least, yes.
There's quite a lot of things that we as a team want to really be able to portray from the era. Partly things that we want to focus on more so than others. In general, the Victorian era was that of a struggle in many cases. But for Victoria 3, our intent has very much been to go in the direction that is a lot more inspiring and inviting to the players, and really try to get across the beauty and the artistic integrity that came from the area itself.
Yes.
So in general, the one thing that we are really trying to push for in Victoria 3 is the sort of essence of the art from the Victorian era, not just create a realistic type of looking game that looks like the Victorian era, but getting the art from the era itself into the game at the same time as we're really trying to make sure that from a visual perspective we're making sure that we have a sort of exclusive look to the game. We don't want this to be very run down and very factory heavy and industrial in that regard. We really want to push the extravagance and the beauty. And
it's very vibrant looking as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. We're really trying to push for a lot of the different colors and the different elements that came out of the era from lots of different cultures. And in doing so, we get a nice sort of melding pot of various different graphical aspects from the sort of really posh, noble life, as well as some of the more serene beauty of the farm life itself. And in consequential of what sort of culture that you are belonging to, we try to give some respect to each of those areas within the game. And this is sort of a conscious decision in that the game itself has to be to a point where we are inviting you to take part in some of the more dark and troubling parts of the history in this era, but at the same time we want to do it in a way that is not deterring you from participating. We want to make sure that that the visuals of the game sort of sell the fact that that there was so much to come out of this. The one of the things that we are tackling is, of course, the Civil War in the U.S.
Yes,
and the intent there is not so much to sort of try to make everything appear as it was really clean and not that all disturbing, but rather to allow you as a player to have an idea that this is still events that do occur throughout the era, but something that does not turn you away from the game as a whole. We didn't want to really go into the really harsh grit that sometimes comes across.
Yes. You show some of the darkness of the era, but it's still very hopeful, I would say.
Indeed. We try to ensure that even throughout the rougher times of this era, we can portray a sense of hope and a purpose for the player to really strive on, and that a lot of the things that we portray lead towards something that is greater. A lot of our visual elements sort of culminates in that aspect of just showing you that you can strive for ingenuity, you can strive for freedom of your people, you can do a lot of things. And visually, we want to fuel that. We want to really sell the story that you as a player can change the course of history and alter these possible events that has occurred.
Because looking at this piece of art here, you see a lot of socioeconomic classes in one and same picture. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we want to make sure that this is not just a bureaucrat or aristocratic type of world that you're living in. The individual attention that we've spent on various classes of society within various different cultures eventually leads you to a really sort of diverse and also a game that visualizes not just the upper class, but also what's happening sort of in the working class of society. In general, our intent is bring as much attention across the board, and to ensure that you as a player feel like you have some sort of connection to the different characters in the game, whether or not they are rulers or if they are even slaves.
Because in an earlier panel, we were talking about the importance of the population, the pops. And so that is also reflected in the art very much.
Very much so indeed. We really want to make sure that the pops themselves have some sort of unique expression. And we've put a lot of time into ensuring that we have lots of different variations of looks for each population type, as well as each different culture, and really trying to merge that with the era itself, not to sell it in a sort of comical way, but a way that really helps you as a player to identify which sort of character you're looking at. So one of the examples is, for instance, that we're really trying to portray bureaucrats with their ledgers and their very sort of appropriate attire. And the same goes for farmers, that they wield pitchforks, and you can sort of see just by looking at them what their life is like and what their job description is and where they sort of fit into the hierarchy of society. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that even farmers, to a certain extent, have a lot of effort put into them to make sure that they are, much like the rest of the game, hopeful. So that's the general idea. Now, when it comes to the details of the world, a lot of our effort has been sort of looking into where we want to place our details, because Victoria 3 is a huge game. So our intent has very much been to figure out where, in terms of the zoom level, in terms of where you are on the map, and where our details should end up going. Because we don't necessarily want to spread them evenly throughout. Some things are more important than others. And one of these things is, of course, the hubs, the cities where the pops live, and sort of dictate your resources and your production. So from a visual standpoint, we really want to put a lot of effort into making sure that the hubs feel not just like they are expanding with you, but also that they sort of depict the type of people that inhabit the city. And the way we've gone about doing this is through a lot of research into the era and the visuals of the buildings. And of course, as with many things, this also varies a lot between cultures. A Western city and an Eastern one look totally different apart. Yet the same sort of gameplay mechanics still is consistent throughout.
So it's not just about the artistic visual flair. It also has a lot of interesting and important information about the region.
Absolutely. Our intent was very much to have a lot of the buildings that would otherwise just be a part of an infograph and showing what would be produced and so delivered to you. We want them to be shown on the map as 3D objects and as part of the world. And this is true for all the different cultures in the game, as well as in terms of just depicting how big or small a hub is. If it's located in a region that has a lot of resources, then you'll have certain looks to your hub based on if you want to cultivate those resources, whereas a hub in a different region will look completely different.
Yes, it must be a very big challenge, this organization of information in a way that is also aesthetically pleasing for the player.
Absolutely. It is a tricky thing indeed. But when it comes to it, the visualization on the map as a whole is very much so that we want you to get an understanding of what's going on in your hubs, but not so much in depth that you can deduct everything from it. If we were trying to achieve that, we would sort of we would have to pack a lot of information into the map that would clutter it to the point where readability gets hurt a bit. And we really don't want to do that, because there's still so much information in the user interface itself. And also, we just want to make sure in the long run that what we're looking at on the map in terms of the hubs and cities, that they look nice, and that they have some of the monuments that you'll recognize from the era. One of the monuments that we can show off is actually Machu Picchu, located on the western side of South America, and really is one of those sort of highlights that we try to sprinkle around the map to really ensure that there is something to look at in various different places, not just in your hubs and not just in landscapes stretching across vast open areas, but we want to make sure that there are things that visually occur that sort of break up the monotony and also that look really nice. And for you as a player, not just to be able to find them and sort of go into their looks, but also for you to really get a sense of the atmosphere as a whole. But as I mentioned before, a lot of what we're doing has to do with alleviating what would otherwise be a very heavy thing to understand and comprehend because of the amount of information. And talking about that, a lot of work has been done on the UI front to really try to create a visual style that is both elegant at its core. We want to have a lot of golden decorations around edges of our framing and so on to make sure that it looks nice. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that the information is getting delivered properly. Because we know that in such a complex game, there is a lot of information to deliver.
Yes, absolutely.
And we really want to make sure that the information is what's taking the focus here, not so much the artistic backgrounds and stuff like that. To some extent, we have to balance that out to make sure that we are prioritizing the right things.
Yes, that balance is, of course, very important. Speaking as a new player of GSGs overall, it's very easy to be very, very overwhelmed by all the information once you get into it. But I think you're doing a pretty good job at keeping that balance. Definitely.
Yeah, I think one of our main sort of focal points has been to really try to sell not just a very functional looking UI, but also one that can give you some, here's a nice image that embodies this sort of section that I'm in right now. And here is another image that's showing, that's the landscape of the region that I'm in. And really try to take into consideration not just all of the gameplay elements, but also some of the visual elements that helps convey those. Not just through text, but also through some nice imagery.
I understand what you mean. You see the visual representation of the information, and it helps you connect what it is you're looking at in a different way that might make it less overwhelming.
Indeed. And really, one of our key points to the game as a whole that I mentioned earlier about trying to really sprinkle details across the map and creating a world that is refreshing to look at throughout its huge scope is throughout its ambience, and really wanting to push the visuals of the game to a point where even if nothing is going on, the game can still look nice. And we've really tried to capture a look of these ambience effects that are relevant to the era. So the clouds that we use in our Fog of War are based off of paintings from the era, and that sort of methodology of really trying to sell to you, the player, that you are contextualizing the world that you are looking at, consciously or not. And when it comes to the atmosphere as a whole as well, one thing that we also want to do is make sure that there are not just buildings sprinkled across the map, but there are also effects and just life in the map as a whole. Birds flying, storms brewing, and waves in the just Atlantic open sea that will give you a sense of, a hint of that drama that so many paintings from the Victorian era has.
Yes.
And these are simply visual sprinkles that we really want to make sure that the players can sort of discover on their own and not just shove in their face. It's something that hopefully gets everyone playing this game to look around a bit more and see what you can find.
Well, I certainly do that when I play.
Yeah, good to hear. And in general, marrying all of this, the buildings and their aesthetics, as well as the different cultures, on top of the fact that we really want to make sure that the landscape itself and all the work that we've put into making a map that looks not just gorgeous, but is also fairly accurate to the era. All of that comes together in creating an ambience that sets the tone very much of the game as a very hopeful, grand-looking type of GSG, but also one that has a lot of influences from the artistic side of the era itself, so that you as a player are reminded that this is not just an abstraction of the era, but this has actual context to it.
So with the ambience and immersion especially in mind, usually when you see a lot of media or games set in the Victorian era, there's usually a very, very specific socioeconomic class in focus, as well as it's usually very Europe-centric, isn't it? What is your approach to this in Victoria 3?
We have really done our utmost to create as much of a diversity and variety in terms of culture as possible. Not just to sort of touch on them, just to include them, but rather to really try to evenly distribute our visual assets so that pretty much as many of them are related to countries outside of the sort of norm. And a lot of our cultural variety also stems from the fact that we think a lot of the stories and the events that occurred in these countries are just as interesting as those in the Western world at the time. So the intent is very much to provide not just characters with their own looks and their own cultural backgrounds, but also the cities and the buildings that you construct, the monuments that you can find across the map, and also just making sure that as a game, this way for us to sort of include and signify the presence of cultures that are usually left in the unknown is super important.
There must have been a massive research effort behind doing this.
Certainly, especially when it comes to characters and their outfits. There were a lot of really cool outfits from various different countries around the world. Generals with crowns on their heads and lots of other like really nice gowns that I've never seen before until now. So a lot of variety in terms of how our characters look, but also when it comes to the research of the landscapes and the cities and the architecture, research has been done to try to capture as much of an authentic feel as possible, while still keeping what I've said earlier in mind about the sort of hopefulness and the sort of ambience that we're going for concurrent throughout, regardless if you're in the Western world or the Eastern world or wherever you may be. On the map as well, we're really trying to sell these different parts of the world through different color balances and just ensuring that the world itself looks different. Like when you're hovering over China, for instance, you'll get a slightly different look to the world as a whole than you would if you're over rainy Britain, for instance.
Is it rainy in Britain?
It's a bit rainy in Britain.
Okay,
yeah,
that's perfect. Like it.
And on top of that, the maps that is sort of the game's backbone. The paper map that allows you as a player to take a step back and really look on the whole world as an overview is something that we've put a lot of effort into. The paper map as a whole is intended for players to have as clear of an idea as possible to what's going on a large scale of things. So when you have dealt with sort of the micromanaging of your hubs and your pops, you can scroll back out and get a nice big overview of the map as a whole. And in general, what we've tried to do here with the map visually is capture that sort of, once again, essence of the era through a lot of the elements that we can find in maps from the time, while still keeping it a bit fresher so that it's readable still. Our intent has been very much to provide a paper map that allows the players to get an understanding and get a very sort of wide knowledge of what's happening where in relation to that, and what can I do to sort of bridge the gap between these resources and those resources. And we've been working very close as a team, cross-discipline, to really try to push the different sort of lenses that we have in the game so that they visually convey something that is understandable and that gives you that information that you're seeking. Where can I build? Where can I expand? Where can I attack or advance? So a lot of that goes into the paper map as a whole, because again, what we don't want to do is overclutter the sort of world map and the 3D map. And our intent is for you as a player to feel that both of these sort of visual modes have their own function, and that you want to use them both sort of equally, and know when you feel like, oh, I need to zoom back out and I need to really get in there.
Okay. And I think we are out of time. Thank you so much, Max, for participating and for showing us a little bit about the art of Victoria 3.
Thank you very much, Anna.
And that is all for this panel, but we will have more to share about Victoria going forward. I think we still have a little more content for PDXCON, so check out the schedule. And also make sure to follow us on social media, because we'll be sharing a lot more going forward. But you should also go to Steam, search for Victoria 3, and wishlist it. Thank you so much for watching.
the PDXCON Remixed announcement show. Now entering the remix is your host for the evening, the CEO of Paradox Interactive, Ebba Ljungerud.
Well, this is different. I wasn't sure what to expect from a digital PDXCon, but now when I'm here, actually maybe it's not that different. I mean, it's different in a few ways. First of all, you're not here. I miss the energy from you, the audience, but it's also different in a nice way. I get to leave my house. I get to actually put on some nice clothes, not just walk around in my ugly activewear all the time. It's certainly been a year. We launched CK3 in the middle of this. I can't believe we actually managed that. It feels like just a couple of days ago that King Henrik and I were standing on stage in Berlin announcing the game. But here we are. No matter what it takes, and no matter what virtual worlds I have to travel to make this happen, I am so proud and happy to get to host this announcement show for you. I just love that we can present everything that we have to show here today. All of us at Paradox, we've been working hard to bring you the games that you love and to make PDXCON Remixed a reality, virtual or not. This is going to be a different show for sure, but I think you will like what we have got. I'm not going to go on for too long here in the beginning. I know you're eager to get to the games, but I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for joining this new spin of PDXCON. For me, PDXCON is really about three things, and I don't want us to miss any of those. The first one is the games, which we've got here today. So don't worry, we've got that part covered. The second part, that's our teams and staff. We've been working very hard all this time to bring games out to you. I have to admit, it has been a little bit harder than usual, but I also miss seeing everyone in the office chatting around the coffee machine. So I'm very happy to have some of you here today to join and talk about what you've been working on. Most importantly, of course, number 3, you, our players. As I said, it's better to have you here in person, and you've told us that one of the main reasons you come to PDXCon is to meet with us. We feel exactly the same way, just to bounce ideas and discuss what's going on. It's so fantastic. I'm glad we're able to do this as a digital event, but I do want you all to know that my goal and my ambition is that we can go back to having a live and physical PDXCon as soon as possible. I can't wait to see you all there. So, narrator, announcement person, where are you? Are you still there?
It's physically impossible for me to leave.
Okay, that's very concerning. But let's get this show on the road. It's time to talk about what's coming next for Crusader Kings 3.
Now entering the game director for Crusader Kings 3, welcome to the remix, Alexander Altner.
Hi, Alex. Welcome to our beautiful court.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So last time when you were on PDX Insider, you talked about Northern Lords, our first flavor pack for Crusader Kings. And now you're here to announce the first expansion. Can you tell us a bit more?
Absolutely. First, to recap, we have released the Ruler Designer, free for everyone who plays CK3. And as you mentioned, Northern Lords, where you got to experience life in Scandinavia and lots of Viking adventures. But now we are ready to announce the first major expansion that adds a new layer of gameplay and drama to the upper echelons of the ruling class.
So me being a bit of an insider, I have heard that there's a lot of both political intrigue and mysterious motivations in this expansion. And we also have a trailer to show just how involved life in court can be.
It is not enough to simply have power. One must display it. This wedding does not merely represent the union of two mighty houses. It's a show of power. Our court is a grand stage, a tribute to our might. Now the scene is set. Every player a pawn in this grandest of schemes. For when this day is over, our enemies shall taste their bitter defeat. Our revenge complete and no one will ever underestimate our bloodline again. You see, real strategy requires cunning.
Wow, that's amazing.
Indeed. So what is the most iconic image of a medieval ruler you can think of?
This room, perhaps?
Indeed. It's a ruler on their throne surrounded by vassals and courtiers. This represents the grandeur of the monarch, how powerful they are, who they can surround themselves with. So you will be able to enter your own throne room and interact with numerous systems, all to further your own political power and agenda. There will be drama between courtiers, there will be exhibitions of wealth, and you will be able to deliver justice and much more. To this end, we bring you Crusader Kings 3, The Royal Court.
The Royal Court sounds very, very good. And being able to sit in the seat of power, doling out rewards as the ruler of your very own court, that kind of sounds like a dream come true. Is that it, or do we have even more things in this expansion?
It is certainly part of it. So kings and emperors will have their own royal court, their throne room.
Yeah.
And in that, they can decide to hold court, inviting the vassals of the realm to air their grievances and come with petitions. And this has major impacts on the realm.
Okay.
But there is more. So the royal court is the embodiment of your power and grandeur and royal majesty. You will be judged by your peers based on its grandeur. What artifacts do you have on display? How much are you spending on your court in the form of lodgings or food or clothes? And the more you spend, the more interesting guests will want to visit your court.
Okay, guests. That sounds very intriguing. Will the guests, will they impact the court in very big sweeping ways, or is it more minute changes that comes from this?
So the guests will have something called an inspiration, which means that they want to do or make something, but they can't do it by themselves. They need your patronage.
Okay, and if I become a patron, how does that affect me as a ruler?
So there are different types of inspirations. For example, there are adventurers that want to go and hunt a mighty beast or find a lost artifact. But there are also smiths and weavers and scholars and many more. They all want to create something that you can either put into your inventory, your personal inventory, or into your court to further your grandeur.
Okay, very interesting guests indeed. If I understand it correctly, this expansion also contains a big overhaul of the cultural system.
Yes, I mean, what is a ruler without their subjects, after all? So this is likely the most exciting thing for a lot of players. Cultures, instead of being static, now have pillars such as language and heritage, and the traditions that set them apart from each other. They also have dynamic attitudes where happenings in the world will make cultures like or dislike each other. And as CK3 covers half a millennium of history, the cultures of old would be barely recognizable for us today.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And they changed and evolved over time. And to that end, we have introduced two new systems to represent this: divergence and hybridization.
I can't wait to get my hands on this, I have to say, and I know our community will feel the same. So is there a release date for this expansion?
Unfortunately, we cannot tell you when the Royal Court will be released.
Okay.
But know this, we're hard at work with it. First, we will finish the Azure patch.
And that's a free update?
Yes, released during this summer.
Okay.
And until the release of Royal Court, after the Azure patch, we will have lots of dev diaries detailing Royal Court feature.
All right, very exciting. Good luck with this endeavor that you're on. I know that you also have a lot of stuff planned for this weekend, the PDXCON Remixed. Is there anything in particular that you want to highlight?
Yes, two things. The Trials and Tribulations panel and the Crusade Anything Q&A. Both of them have CK3 devs. So it will be very interesting to see what you will think.
That sounds good. Thank you, as always, for being here, Alex. Very nice to chat about Crusader Kings 3.
Happy to be here.
And we hope to see all of you in the community online. And we look forward to ruling our futures together.
Now advancing hundreds of years into the future to the city of Chicago. Entering the remix is the CEO of Romero Games and the director of Empire of Sin, Brenda Romero.
Brenda, hello. Welcome to our beautiful 20s Chicago.
Well, it's wonderful to be here on the other side of this floating monitor.
Well, welcome to the remix. How have you been?
Busy. We have all been hustling lately on updates and the new stuff we've put into Empire of Sin over the last few months. So our players have responded really well to changes like combat auto-resolve and the safe house changes and all the balancing and tweaks the team has done.
Yeah, that's right. You mentioned at Paradox Insider that you're working on some really major changes. I have to say, I think this is one of the coolest things with our games, that when you think they're done and you think that there won't be any more additions, then the devs come back and they've done something completely new and it's almost a new experience.
Then if I were to tell you that we're about to make some more major updates to Empire of Sin, you'd enjoy that news?
Yeah, I think I would be okay with that, yes.
Awesome. So where do I even start? I guess, first of all, you know we're 100% committed to making Empire of Sin as great as it be, both to improve what's already out there and add some new exciting things that you haven't seen before. So it's great that I get to confirm both of these today. And let's take a look at our next big update for starters, because we're making some major changes in what we call the Precinct update.
Ah, nice. Tell me more.
Sure. So one of the central features of the game we're working to update in the Precinct update is Empire Management. And to do this, we're introducing a new concept to Empire of Sin called, this won't be a surprise, precincts. So precincts allow you to manage your neighborhoods in large areas rather than worry about each individual building. So you can upgrade several rackets at once with global changes, and precincts also help you set up supply lines and create a defensible perimeter.
Okay, so to me that sounds like a pretty substantial addition from a strategic point of view.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this means you can cut off your rival supplies and take over a precinct or two between theirs. So we really think it's going to improve how Empire of Sin plays, both in strategy and in Empire management once your turf starts to grow. So we're also proud to announce that Empire of Sin, with the Precinct update, is going to add a feature that makes Paradox players very, very happy.
Okay, so that must be sweet and overpowered.
I don't know how you know these things. They set up an outpost in Chicago. Absolute confirmed. Actually, it is mod support.
Ah, okay. Well, that's just as good. We love mods.
In Sweden. So
in Sweden.
The Precinct update is going to open up modding for PC players, and we're eager to see how the community plans to tell their own stories and to make Empire of Sin their own.
Okay, yeah, that sounds amazing. So when are we going to be able to play this new update?
Well, we're planning on launching the Precinct update alongside something else we're excited about. And for that, I'd like to show you our newest trailer.
Okay, let's roll it.
Greed. It's the real lifeblood of Chicago. And there's always opportunities to make a buck in this town. You know, a fixer. Need a loan or help smoothing over a little relationship problem? Want to make sure your competition leaves town quietly. In this city, you gotta take what you want. Go ahead, make a move. Just remember, you better make it count. Maya Lansky. At your service.
Yeah, so Make It Count is our first premium expansion for Empire of Sin, and it's going to bring a whiskey barrel of new content to the game. So the trailer's obviously just a tease, but soon we'll have much, much more to share with you. New missions, new items, new rackets, and more. So right now I want to introduce you to the game's new boss, Meyer Lansky. So Lansky was known as the mob's accountant. He succeeded through his financial know-how, and he even developed the criminal syndicates in Atlantic City. So you know he's as good with a gun as he is with numbers.
Very interesting. But so you mean that he's a boss that is actually better with the profits than the violence?
Well, he's definitely very good at both. He offers some new choices on how you might take over Chicago, and he wouldn't be a proper Empire of Sin boss if he didn't also have some vicious combat moves. So he's definitely got more than one way to close a deal.
Okay, Brenda, I really want to meet this guy. I also want to see the updates on all the other bosses. So tell me, when can we play this?
Make It Count and the Precinct update are both planned to debut later this year.
Okay, brilliant, Brenda. It's always a pleasure. Do you have anything else for our Empire of Sin fans that you want to share?
Yeah, actually, plenty more. So we've got all kinds of panels this weekend that the Romero Games team is helping out with, and I am especially eager to chat with our fans during our Q&A tomorrow. All the details, of course, are on the PDX Remix schedule.
They are indeed. Brenda, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to see you, and I hope to see you very soon again. There you have it. The first expansion and update coming for Empire of Sin later this year.
What use is a rifle without ammunition? And what use is ammunition in the hull of a sunken ship? A good general knows there is no strategy without logistics. For what use are 2,000 fit and well-trained soldiers if they're marching in the wrong direction? Over 5 years, millions of hours of gameplay have simulated every possible outcome of the Second World War. The tides have turned in all directions, and every capital in the world have seen a victory parade. But one thing remains consistent. Not one battle was ever won without the troops, the equipment, and the support being at the right place at the right time. On D-Day this year, we want to thank our players for 5 years of excellence. Looking ahead to future victories.
Welcome to the remix and happy anniversary to the game director of Hearts of Iron 4, Don Lind.
Wow. Yep, I can't believe it's been 5 years already, guys. It kind of feels like almost yesterday, but I guess time flies when you're having fun. I wanted to talk to you guys about basically how the game started, which was half of an email page that I sent to Johan and Fred for some feedback. And it outlined like the main things I wanted to do with Hearts of Iron 4. And for me, it was I wanted to focus on industry, and I wanted to focus on equipment. I always really liked those aspects of the war. I also wanted it to be a game where you focused a lot more on the big planning aspects rather than micromanagement and things like that. And also after the modding scene on HOI 3 didn't really take off, I wanted HOI 4 to be the Paradox game with the strongest, the best modding scene. So that was my focus. And thinking back a bit on development, I guess the only thing I really regret is the fact that we didn't get to use the whole marketing budget for Tank, because we did seriously talk about that, and I still haven't really given up hope. So maybe one day. It's been a pretty intense 5 years since release, and during that time we listened a lot, we updated a lot, and we focused on pretty much all of the aspects of World War II. So we've been expanding and updating both naval warfare, land warfare, air warfare, as well as adding new things like espionage, new alt history paths, and generally just more content. And also from a modding scene perspective, it is so big now. There's thousands of mods, there's a ton of really popular ones, and it's so great to see that, honestly. I still can't believe how big Hearts of Iron really has gotten, honestly, sometimes. Anyways, now that I'm here, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of the developers who worked on the game for over years, right? There's many of us now. And I also want to thank all of the people in the community, the influencers, the modders, the players, because you are the guys that made the game great, and it's awesome. So, in fact, to celebrate that awesomeness for the anniversary, we got a bunch of cool planned activities. So, for example, we're going to be doing a really cool competitive multiplayer match with some famous influencers to see who is really the master of war there. And here at PDXCON, we're going to be running a bunch of cool panels as well, where you're going to be finding out both about the past and the future of Hearts of Iron. So I hope that's going to be really interesting. And that's actually all from me today. Hope this was interesting, and I'll see you guys later.
Wait, really? Okay, you know this is an announcement show, right?
Oh, right. Sorry. Okay, we do have one more thing, actually. Roll the clip, guys. All right. Consider that a little teaser for No Step Back, the next expansion for Hearts of Iron 4. It's going to be focusing on the Soviet Union. It's going to be focusing on the Eastern Front. You're going to be able to design your own tanks. You're going to be able to modify your military in new cool ways. And it's a brand new supply system using trains and railroads as well. So if you guys want to know more about this, we actually have several panels, and we'll be telling you guys a bit more details and cool stuff. So I hope I get to see you guys there.
Joining the remix is the community manager for City Skylines, Helena Grayson.
Hi, Helena, welcome.
Hello. Thank you. The city is awesome.
I know. It looks amazing, doesn't it? Great to have you here. Tell me what's going on with the cities these days. Any surprises?
Yeah, actually, we do have some surprises. We have heard the community loud and clear. You want more content for City Skylines. So we're here to give it to you. We've reached out to two incredible content creators who have created two brand new content creator packs.
Oh, cool.
It's exciting news, I know, but why keep talking about it? Let's watch some videos.
Oh, yeah.
This is Earl Gibb, and you're listening to Sunny Breeze. Kick back or sit normally and relax.
This is Jane Ace. You're listening to Railhawk Radio.
Train stations and bridges and piers. Very fun. When will I be able to play?
Well, that's actually the best part. Both CCPs are available right now today on all platforms.
Very cool. Can't wait to get home and play. Tell me a bit more about what's in them.
Sure thing. For train stations, we brought on Bad Peanut, who is a longtime community creator. He's actually so talented that he's now working with Colossal Order.
Oh, okay.
He created 12 stations and 4 hubs, both elevated and underground. They're super modern and super cool.
Great. What about Bridges and Piers?
Yeah, that one was created by Andres, aka Armesto. You might remember him from our City Builder series we did a while back. He created 22 unique assets that come in a variety of styles to fit any type of city's waterfront.
Cool, cool. And then you mentioned 2 radio stations?
Absolutely. We wanted to connect the radio stations to game content. Okay. So we took our inspiration for Rail Hawk Radio from our train station, CCP, and we have Sunny Breeze radio station, which is inspired by our Bridges and Piers, CCP.
Very, very cool. I am very much looking forward to this, and it sounds great. What about the future? Any other plans?
Yes, we want the community to know we are not done with cities. We will continue supporting our fantastic community with fun and engaging events. We recently concluded the Berlin build-off with the Stadtmuseum. We just finished our the last episode of our Meet the Expert series on YouTube, which if you haven't checked it out, you should. Our creative team did an amazing job. And currently we're working on an event with Red Bull. It's going to be a little bit later this year because we are working on a new approach.
Okay, so is this the competition you were hinting about when we were preparing before?
It is. We'll be inviting some creators to participate in challenges that we came up with. It should be pretty fun and interesting.
Okay, cool, cool. We'll check it out. And what about this weekend, PDXCON Remixed? What do you have planned?
We have lots planned. I myself will be participating in our global build-off and the Where Are We live stream, but I'm also excited for the workshop on how to build assets, since we just worked on the CCPs. And I'm excited for the return of the Talk Cities to me.
Good stuff, good stuff. Anything else you want to mention?
Mostly I just want to say thank you from the entire City Skylines team. We've enjoyed working on the CCPs, celebrating our 6th anniversary in March, working on the Berlin Build-Off and the Meet the Experts series, and now working with Red Bull on an event for the community. It's been incredible, and we're looking forward to making even more memories with this amazing community. We do it all because you are awesome.
Yeah, I could not agree more. The community and you guys, that's really the reason why we're here, I think. All right, great to see you. Thank you so much for coming. Have a good show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and good luck with the rest of the announcement show.
Thank you very much. All right, halfway through almost. How do you guys think it's going so far? Voiceover person, what do you think?
I'm contractually obligated to find this incredible.
Okay. Why did you sign a contract saying that?
It was in Swedish.
Okay. Even more, why did you sign that? But okay, I actually think this is amazing. I think we have a fantastic set. We've been working super hard to do this digitally, never before for us. So at least let's acknowledge the fantastic work that's gone into this.
I agree wholeheartedly with the opinions expressed by the CEO of Paradox Interactive, Ebba Ljungerud.